between
No, you have to say that's a Volcel, of course.
Volcel slash incel. I would say
no.
okay, no.
What?
The height thing. The idea of
Ahrelevant's about to lose it.
80-20 rule.
I felt like over the videos that you've made regarding femcels and incels, it seems like you.
Oh, he's the incel master. Oh.
In lived experience or and stuff like that, can you tell me in your mind what's the real differences between an incel and a femcel? Or I believe you also sometimes use incel for women as well, and you don't separate the two. For instance, you've called yourself an incel.
Uh-oh.
Is there a difference in lived experience between male incels and female incels?
I don't think the difference is as profound or polarized as it's presented as. I think men and women have a lot more in common than they do otherwise. And I think we're so fixated on the 10% of things that distinguish us that we forget about all the commonalities in terms of experience, in terms of anxiety, social anxiety, the issues that we can face, etc. So I don't think that the difference is as pronounced as it's presented as, insofar as sort of having these different polarizing camps of femcels and their boundaries, incels and their boundaries. So I would say that obviously, just based on how they interact, especially online, that the experiences are different. But in terms of whether it needs to be different or whether it actually would be different if there was just communication between them, I doubt it.
So you don't think there would be much of a difference if we had a kind of an unbiased communication about the male soul experience and the female incel experience, or you think that for the most part it would be very similar?
Oh, shit.
I think the difference that I see isn't a difference that I believe in, but in terms of the difference, the rhetoric seems to be that incels proclaim that there's no such thing as femcels, that women can't be incels. And I think, personally, my belief is that there really isn't such a thing as an incel, that everybody essentially in this entire discourse is basically a Volcel, just for very different reasons, different experiences in the world. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question there, if you don't mind. So you don't think that men can be incels? Can you elaborate on that? You think they're Volcels? Do you think these people are choosing not to have sex in general?
I'm so sorry. This is so stupid. I saw that Omni amplifier gun. Hey, should the God of Epiphany and his child raping prophet peacefully come in him?
Okay. No.
It's not funny. I'm so sorry.
I think that the issue that I find with incels and with this entire conversation is that there's a lot of projecting of excuses and explanations onto everybody else except oneself in terms of things that one is dealing with. I'm not saying that, you're responsible and that it's your fault if you can't get laid. I think it's just a lot more complex than just that. There seems to be this entire narrative around inceldom that essentially you can, if you get laid and if you have sex, suddenly all your problems are going to be solved, or that ultimately you're somehow going to get a different result if you just sit on Tinder and try to get laid that way, even though the odds are definitely not in your favor. I think that in that sense, in terms of actually looking at oneself and thinking, what can I do in order to build my esteem, build my confidence, and actually reflect on, what potentially I could do, what potentially may be wrong or misplaced with how I'm approaching the world, how I'm approaching women or men. There isn't enough of that, or a lot of that, relative to the, I think, critique, and in most cases, a valid critique of modern life, of modern interactions. But in terms of getting beyond that critique to actual action, I think that's
actual action. That's my favorite kind of action.
Especially when it comes to one's own self. So yeah.
Does that answer your question, Wick? Because I'll continue. Okay, so Maybe I could try with a tangible example, my real experience, because I would consider myself growing up to have been an incel. And the reason why is because when I was like 15 years old, I had very poor like social intelligence. Like I didn't really know what people wanted from me. And I had very bad social skills, like ability to get people like me. So I kind of pretty much just had my friends and then everybody else, right? It was very difficult for me to make friends, which makes it very difficult to start relationships. So I actually had women that were interested in me. I just couldn't perceive it. Like I didn't, it wasn't something in my field of view. So would you consider somebody that has an inability, like they're trying, but they haven't, because I was trying.
Wait, oh my God.
An inability to be able to perceive when women were interested in me. And I had an inability to like kind of approach women, become friendly, which for the most part is going to be how a lot of relationships start when it's going to be conversation.
Stop cutting out your mic. Ahrelevant.
Because I had those inabilities, would I count as an incel in your mind?
Oh, I did this.
Yes and no, in the same way that I would consider my particular situation that I relayed in my last video about this to be involuntarily celibate. It's something that is involuntary. I mean, who wants to be socially anxious? Who wants to be sort of a social pariah in that sense? Nobody, realistically. And who wants to feel sexually stunted? Again, nobody. So I would say that it's involuntary in that sense. But insofar as it being something that you can address, it's very difficult, very challenging. Likely nobody and society isn't going to help you along the way in terms of facing sort of 99% rejection and awful experiences in order to get to that sort of 1% of experiences that may be positive. I would say that in that regard, there is something voluntary about it. And I think that it's making that step towards sort of seeing, okay, what can I do? And also that reckoning with yourself about the issues which you face, the issues which you experience with yourself, with your anxiety, or in my case, my stuntedness, things that I can't really, nothing will change if I just reconcile myself to my stuntedness, or you reconcile yourself to your anxiety and your social issues, say. There has to be a reckoning, a self-reckoning. And so in that sense, I would say there is an element of voluntary.
So let's say in the example, because I agree with you, and it's earlier in my life, I wasn't like of the mentality that you spoke to previously about like blaming the world. I recognized I had social problems. I recognized that I needed to improve them. And so I tried to socialize more to improve them, primarily more recently. And so I understand and I agree with you that there's people that take a separate route with that. If I am taking the steps forward to try and improve my social circumstances, so I'm taking agency or my issues, would I then be considered an incel fully? Because I understand that where you're drawing the voluntary bit is that I could put in labor that would no longer make myself an incel. But as long as I'm trying my best and doing everything I can at that moment, is it like, do I still have that voluntary factor? Because I'm taking the steps needed and doing the best that I can do, but I'm still not there yet because it's a process. It takes time, energy.
Exactly. That's the thing. It takes a lot of time. And I think especially now, there is this sort of, with a lot of incel rhetoric, there's this sense of urgency, especially with young men. And I get it, okay? I mean, who doesn't want to have sex, especially when you're young and vibrant and all you can think about is sex? I get it.
To be fair, now I'm extrapolating here. Since I've been in chat and I've been fucking my whole life, I gotta extrapolate. But I think that for incels, I don't think it's like the sense of urgency. Is it like, I need to fuck now, I need to fuck now, I wanna fuck now. I think the sense of urgency comes from the idea that like, if I'm 25 and still a virgin, does that mean I've like missed my chance? I think that's the scary part for people that are lacking social skills or lacking experience with women, is that you're worried that once you hit a certain age, it's like, it's just not going to happen. Like, fuck, I'm 30 years old and I still haven't had sex. Like, people have been fucking at half my age. Like, is it, you're right? I think that's why there's such a time pressure for it.
But at the same time, sort of the world and the context in which we live is really not like it was 50 years ago, in which there really was that prospect of actually just going to a dance hall, meeting a girl, and sort of the deal of a...
I think that's why she's pushing back against the term incel, that nobody is in a place where they can never have sex, but I think a lot of incels think that. I mean, kind of, but it's kind of like saying, like, every poor person chooses to be poor. That's technically true. Like, if you're poor in the United States, you could become rich through the right investments, through the right education, like, you could do that. But I mean, like, it's such a weird and reductive way to define involuntary, that, like, why do you choose to be poor? You would say, well, environmental, et cetera, right? You'd have a more complicated answer. For incels, my guess is that if you were to draw up, there's a name for these, like, actuary tables. Would this be an amortization table? Maybe, but like, if you reach age 15 and you haven't had sex yet, the chance of you having sex is probably like 80%. If you reach age 20 and you haven't had sex yet, it probably goes down to like 60%. If you reach age 30, right? Whereas like when you get to the end, if you've reached age like 55 and you haven't had sex yet, the chance of you having sex at that point is probably like 2%. That'd be my guess, right? So like the chances of you having sex probably decrease as you get higher in age and have not had sex yet. I don't know if that'd be considered an actuary table or a reverse amortization table or something, but like that'd be my guess or something, you know?
A sort of courtship in a particular amount of time, leading to a very clear sort of aspect of marriage or what have you, was sort of...
The problem is the age thing isn't irrational. The pool of partners only lowers as you get older. It's not impossible, but it's much harder. It's not about pool of partners. It's about ability to socialize, right? Like, I have never in my life had a moment where I was worried about girls, because I've been socializing with women since I was 14. My whole group of friends was like girls that went to Marion High School in Omaha. I was like friends with girls all the time, so I like never worried about it ever. But if I had graduated high school without that group of friends and went to college and started working, and let's say I had all male coworkers, at that point I'd be really scared, because I'd be like, okay, I'm 19 years old. I didn't have many girlfriends growing up, like friends that were girls even. I don't have many female coworkers. I don't know what the fuck you do at that point. Like, you're fucked. I think that's the worry, is you're becoming increasingly more atomized from the other sex. Can you say that? You're more separated from the other sex as you get more and more specialized as you get older, and then it gets scarier because it's like, fuck, I'm 25, 30 years old, working a job, 95% male coworkers. I have no female friends. What am I supposed to do? Go knitting? Like, that's like the scary part.
Set in stone. Everybody sort of knew the deal. Now things are a lot more complex, a lot more different, and things are happening a lot later.
Can you be more specific with that? Like, you mentioned that things are different and more complex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in your opinion, what's fundamentally changed between then and now? You mentioned going to the dance hall, going out, going to public functions and things like that. You also mentioned like traditional marriage, courtship, things like that. Has it been our views on relationships that's changed that has caused people to be more incel-like of late? What's your thoughts? Can you be a little more specific there?
I think what has caused the sort of the incel-like mindset, and I don't think this is just of incels, I think that a lot of this sort of feeds into itself from just general society. I think it's just contempt. There's a lot of contempt because we really don't have the social tools to deal with a lot of the changes that we are seeing. Examples being primarily the liberation of women's integration into the modern workforce and sort of dominating in modern life in a way that has never been seen before. And I think that in terms of the resources which men have to reckon with that, there really aren't any sufficiently. I think a lot of rhetoric around men's rights and around sort of the male or masculine identity is very negative or shut down or ignored or ridiculed. And I think there's a lot of contempt of just generic men for women and vice versa. And that doesn't in any way feed into what is paramount to any relationship, which is empathy, mutual understanding, being able to
seek on units. Yeah, you seek.
Have the same understanding
Chase.
of each other. And I think we're just terrible at relationships in general, but especially now when we have so much, especially women have so much choice insofar as when they want to start a relationship, who they want to be in a relationship with, education, contraception, etc. So I think a lot has changed, whereas 50 years ago, it was very, like I said, set in stone. There wasn't as much choice, as much variety in terms of women having options. It really was not the same in personal relationships as it is now. And I don't think society has prepared men for a reckoning with that reality.
Do you agree with that, Ahrelevant?
Yeah, I think pretty much well, I'm not even sure there's anything to disagree with. Everything is pretty fact. I think that's a lot of those are descriptive statements that are true. One thing I will say is, you're talking about when you talk about the bounty of options that women have, you're talking about in relation to what they used to have?
Yes, and in relation to men.
You think,
and I think, sorry.
I was just going to ask a following up question about, like, do you believe right now women have more options than men?
I think in terms of identity, we have a lot more options. I think we have the option, especially in terms of being more masculine or feminine. It's sort of acceptable to be both, well and truly. In terms of masculinity, I think there's a very finite definition and understanding of that, and that it's incredibly difficult to achieve, at least on the level that is presented on social media. This idea of you sort of being a Chad, an Alpha, or a Sigma, I don't know. It's sort of very much
that's us
sort of
guys, Sigmas.
Idealization of, I think, sort of a very small pool, minority of men, and somehow you have to achieve that. And if you don't, then your life is either doomed or you're just going to have to settle, which is the worst thing for both men and women now.
So you're saying that's the incel ideology, or do you believe that's the reality?
The reality based on so
everything. So it seems like what you're saying is that there's a very fine kind of spectrum for what masculinity allows you to be. Like, it's not very broad.
Yes.
All right. And
yes.
it seems like
generally.
Okay. And you seem, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a broader scope of what you can do as a woman and fit within that. It seems like is what you're saying.
Yes, and I don't necessarily associate anything terribly. Well, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword because variety is always in theory good, but when it comes to it's difficult to navigate, especially when you don't really have the tools for it, and when everybody's competing with each other. I think we can just see that with sort of the conflicts between trad wives or trad women and the modern woman. Feminists are in disarray all the time. Sort of the options of when to have children, if to get married or not to get married, everything. And it's just sort of a conundrum among women, and then even worse between women and men.
That's in disarray. Okay, sorry, those.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I guess then off of that, because I'm not sure if based on how you've described it, I'm leaning towards it. It's not really something that I've thought about, is the array at which women are still defined as women. I haven't thought of it in like a versus, like one over the other, which one's allowed to be whatever. I've thought about like the scope of masculinity and the scope of femininity, but never like against each other, which one is allowed, which one's a broader spectrum or a scope they're allowed to do. But in regards to the incel and femcel situation, or I guess incels between both, if you wait, do you believe that a woman going through, let's see, usually when I'm talking about incels, I'm talking about labor. The amount of labor that it takes to be able to, have sexual activity. That's the difference between an incel and a volcel. So an example might be that, do you believe somebody's an incel if all they have to do is put gas in their car, drive to the next neighborhood, and they can have sex?
No, that's not an incel.
If they put gas in their car,
yeah, they just need to fill up their tank. That's the only thing they need to do, and then they can have sex. Is that person an incel?
But they don't do that.
They don't do it.
And so they don't have sex.
Yeah, are they an incel or a volcel?
Okay, based on my particular definition of inceldom, which I did elaborate on a bit, or sort of that sort of correlation between the
No, you have to say that's a volcel, of course.
Volcel/incel, I would say.
No.
Okay, no.
What?
So they're a volcel.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I would agree, and I think it comes down again to the amount of labor that would be required to be able to actualize. I think this is where a lot of people kind of draw the difference between men and women, is how much labor it takes for women to be able to have sex versus men, or at least men that describe themselves as incels. So if you take me, for example, I've had to put hundreds of hours into learning how to essentially just catch up socially to where a lot of people are quite natively in my age range. I would say this puts me in the incel range because of how much time and labor needs to be put into, and money going out is not cheap to be able to talk with people my age, especially considering I'm not in school anymore. So pretty much the only way I can do it is at like clubs or bars or doing hobby stuff or whatever, right?
Find you a girl that's into psychedelics so you never have to pay for another cocktail in your life. Fuck that shit, bro. If I was a broke-ass college student, dude, psychedelics would be a lifesaver. $5, we can have fun for an entire Saturday on LSD as opposed to $15 drinks. Fuck that.
Maybe the occasional gym conversation is the only places that I'm able to really practice. and so that takes time and money, considerable amounts of it. I'd say that puts me in the incel category in relation to somebody that just needs to fill up a tank of gas. And then I think this is also where a lot of people are struggling when you say like a woman might be an incel, because it's true that you need to put labor in, but typically speaking, for most women alive, the labor is it's pretty much just a Tinder account is the amount of labor that you need to get put in.
Ooh. Okay, this is where we disagree.
Okay.
Because I think that, okay, what do we mean by labor? Because there's physical labor, which is what I think you're talking about. And then there's also, I think a labor that is often overlooked just generically is sort of psychological labor, right? So, I think in terms, for a lot of men, I think, for instance, getting in their car, driving to the next town to a club on their own and actually facing the beast that is woman is a traumatic thought.
Yeah,
it's
of
so
course.
much easier to just sit at home on Tinder, right? So I would say in that sense, there's something involuntary about that, because obviously any man would want to be able to just confidently just go and just face woman.
Yep.
But they don't. And so I think that there's an element of, there's something involuntary about that. And I think that has to do with that overlooked sort of element of labor, which is a psychological labor, which is things that, or are things rather, that sort of that physical ability, that very generic A to B does not make way for.
I understand. I believe it was a part of the video that you made after your conversation with Steven, or Destiny, where
that's right.
You described
say my name
about how it might take you, I believe you said this, correct me if I'm wrong, that it might take you a little bit longer to build the connection necessary to be able to have sex confidently, and that is going to, if it stems from something involuntary, that's not something that you can really choose, then I'm probably going to be a little bit more open than most people to the idea that women can be involuntarily celibate, because especially if we talk about things like trauma.
What is this lookout tower supposed to do?
It's going to be a far better, like a far more easily tangible thing for people to understand that some women might have to take a little bit more time before they have sex. So like, the example that I pose typically on my stream is like, if you have had traumatic experiences where you can't really have sex with somebody until you, let's say,
is it just sight?
Been on like 8 dates, fair way in. Sometimes, it'll take like potentially weeks or months to be able to get to 8 dates for a lot of people. And there's a fair amount of people who just won't wait that amount of time to be able to do it. And so you can have that, and it would result, in my opinion, you being involuntarily celibate, because you have something that's psychologically not voluntary. There's nothing voluntary about it, right? That is preventing you from having sex very quickly, and nobody wants to have sex with you if they have to wait, 2 months.
Can I ask, Ahrelevant, is that the definition we're going to be using? Like, just having to wait a few months before you have sex makes you involuntarily celibate?
Well, it can result in that if the people around you aren't willing to wait. Let's say I've been told like LA, everyone is like super go, 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 go and stuff like that. If you live out there, and I'm sure like if you have some kind of thing where maybe it takes you like 2 months to be able to have sex, you're probably gonna have a very difficult time finding somebody who is going to wait 2 months before they have sex with you. It's probably not gonna be the easiest thing to do. So
I think that's under the Volcel category. You're not willing to lower standards enough to, even with trauma, right? I get the trauma bit, right? But does that make you, I don't know, pedantic perhaps, right?
Well, no, I think probably maybe most people would see it your way, but my whole thing is I'm more open because I don't think that's a voluntary thing. If you're going to have a traumatic response, there's nothing voluntary about that. And it's not like you can just choose to not do it. So therefore, I think it would count as involuntary, right? You didn't.
I understand.
You didn't choose.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. It's just, again...
what if you did choose your trauma?
I don't want to jump in too much here.
No, go for it.
The idea, right, that we have to wait a little longer, right? And maybe it was just my religious background here, but waiting a few months before you have sex doesn't seem that out of the ordinary. I understand that maybe in localized areas that could be a problem, right? And if you're using Tinder or other apps to meet people, absolutely.
Damn, a few
like,
months?
You ain't on Tinder to cure cancer, gang.
Ooh.
Okay. But through normal interactions,
Bro, where
right,
the fuck is the food on this map?
if you want to wait, right? If you want to wait for sex, there are avenues you can pursue that are going to increase your chances for people being okay with that. Religious areas and things like that. So again, I just don't know if that's sufficient. But that's just my thoughts. Anyway.
So I mean that's a great point. You can meet people through certain avenues that are gonna make them disproportionately more likely to be open to waiting.
You have to resist the final. I thought you just needed the population.
Some people might wait until marriage, right, to be able to have sex. Absolutely, but it's about how, again, for me at least, my definition, how much labor and how much stuff you have to do to build up to that. Let's say you're not religious. Are you going to go to church to try and find somebody who's, religious to be able to meet those standards? I could see a couple scenarios in which I would believe that women are capable of being involuntarily celibate. I'm not sure if you fall into that category, Kidology, but I think, nonetheless, even if we grant what was just mentioned, I think the amount of people, of women who fall into that category are incredibly small in comparison to the amount of men.
Okay, I don't see this as terribly helpful in terms of the end goal of ultimately having men and women finding common ground and being able to communicate honestly and meaningfully with each other, so that they don't just end up having sex, but actually end up having good sex. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter if you get laid. What matters is if there's anything that comes after that, if it actually really does fill this void in your soul of being an incel, so that you can transcend or what have you, and that you can actually sustain.
Speak for yourself, lady.
I think sex is really the most insignificant part of all of this. I find it kind of dismal that this is the focus, the obsession of incels about especially physicality, especially appearances, maxing, when well and truly, when it comes to relationships, these things are not the top three things, I would say, of any relationship, of any sustainable, meaningful relationship for men and women in the long term, which is what the majority of people are looking for. A long-term relationship with a partner who validates them, who sees them, who respects them, and they can have mutual love and affection and commitment to each other. And I think that when it comes to your understanding or your definition of this idea of sort of the amount of labor, I think that this leads to this inevitable comparison, this we put in more labor than you. I mean, who knows? I mean, in terms of the labor that I put into trying to engage with men, to form relationships with men, I mean, that's a very arduous, very laborious experience.
The wave is double what you just described on both sides? No shot, bro.
But also, most particularly psychologically, to sort of inevitably disregard that because it doesn't fit into the quantifiable and the physical idea of what is labor, completely just creates even more segregation between what I think is so important for incels to actually find empathy and have empathy with people beyond their sphere, beyond their sort of tribe, and vice versa. I think that this fear that the outside world, especially I would say sort of the left has of incels, is not helping anybody, and vice versa. And I think the only way that we can get beyond this toward actually talking with one another and actually getting further along than just this narrative of we have it worse than you and women are just entitled and don't have to put in any labor or what have you. It doesn't get us anywhere except feeling more self-righteous in our own little boundaries that we've created in order to just validate our existence and our sense of not having to take an element of responsibility for what is going on around us and influencing us.
Okay, so there was a couple of things that I guess I want to respond to
God.
there. I think part of the reason why it's important to address sex
Mel?
in regards to relationships, I agree with you. However, that sex is, not the end-all be-all for even incels. The reason why sex is important specifically for men is because usually if a woman is unwilling to have sex with you, she's also unwilling to view you as a dating prospect. It's very rare that you're going to get a date from a woman that you are completely off limits for sex. It's quite weirdly not very common of a thing. There's a significant overlap with the groups of men that women have sex with and the groups of men, that women have sex with and the groups of men that they date. And so it can be a very good sign to you that you have dating options if you're capable of, at the very least, somewhat reliably, like every 1 to 2 years, able to have sex. And that means that you're probably capable of getting inside of a relationship. So it's a pretty significant milestone for men. However, for women, this tends to not be the case. There's not necessarily a correlation with your ability to have sex and your ability to get inside of relationships. So I think there is a significant reason why we would look at inceldom and the inability to have sex realistically amongst men and women. Also, you seem to address as though I wasn't paying attention to the non-physical labor. Maybe I wasn't super clear, but the statement that I made just a moment ago earlier that brought us to the religious thing was that I believe that there is like an emotional, psychological labor, right, that could present as plenty of women being involuntarily celibate, which some people are going to disagree with me on, but I believe that that can be the case. Now, with all of that there on the table, I think that when we talk about men versus women being involuntarily celibate, we are describing different things. When I say it's
Do you think they're going to come from up here?
Involuntarily celibate, I'm describing something different than when a man is involuntarily celibate. Because when a man, like we just established, incapable of having sex, probably incapable of getting in a relationship. It's not necessarily the case for women. So I see it as having value. There is a utility because it describes not only a difference in how men and women can show success inside of the dating market, but also it can show that like there is differences in how men and women like experience that success. Like I've had.
What have you had?
I'm sure you've heard of it, where there's women that think that because there's incredibly attractive or very desirable men that sleep with them, they think they can be in a relationship with those men.
I feel like this doesn't happen. I don't know how I could ever fucking prove this data-wise. I hear this point brought up a lot in red pill communities, that because women can fuck guys that are out of their dating league, their dating standards will get messed up. I feel like that doesn't happen, but I don't know how it would. It just seems like such a stupid thing. Like women know that they can fuck outside of their dating standards. That's why when women are like testing guys for dating, they won't fuck them on the first date. But like this idea that like a woman like fucks like some Chad dude and then like it's like, oh well, I'm only gonna date guys that are the same as I can fuck. I feel like that's not true.
Seen that before, right?
I'm sure it has happened before, but I feel like in general it's not true.
I mean, yes, on sort of Fresh and Fit and all of that, yes.
Okay, sure. I think that what we're describing here could be informative to those women to be able to describe, you are capable of doing this, but by and large, this isn't going to be a long-term thing. This is just not how it's going to happen. I feel like separating these two has value. Women incels and men incels, I think there's value in separating them.
Yes, I think it has value to an extent. I think that, for instance, what you say, I think a lot of it is informed, especially for women, by cultural factors, long-term historical cultural factors, such as this idea that if women have a lot of sex, they're sluts, that they're undesirable, which definitely feeds into a lot of ideas about women.
So like this, I think the idea of alpha widowing does hold some water. I've met several girls that got hooked up on guys above their league and then compare every guy to that standard. But compare them to that standard how? Like when I hear women talk about their relationships, I never hear women describe like, oh yeah, like my boyfriend is awesome. He's really tall and super masculine and really alpha like that one guy that I fucked. Like that's not usually what I don't think I've ever heard a woman describe a relationship like that before, ever in my life. So like if a woman fucks like a really Chad guy and she got fuckboyed, I can't imagine her thinking, especially because I think Especially because I think women come away with negative feelings sometimes about some of those guys too. It's like, fuck, that guy played me or whatever. And I can't imagine she goes to date another guy. She's like, God, I wish he was as cool as that guy that fucking played me, like 2 months ago. That like, I'm not saying it's impossible. I've never heard a conversation like this ever in my life, and it's hard to imagine hearing a conversation like this. Hold on. Sorry, Jesus. I have a schedule where I type like the N-word like 400 times, and I just realized I was missing my 24-hour window on that, so, okay.
Now, and women's sexuality and promiscuity now. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, I wouldn't say that the data for this is sort of distinct from cultural factors and expectations of men versus women with regards to sexuality. I think there's just this assumption by all of society that men are just sexually hungry.
Can you not go
and
through
that all
these?
they want is just sex. And that's sort of why,
You
So,
mentioned
I think,
you mentioned earlier, Kidology, about how women have more options in how they present and the roles they're able to take on, things like that. They have a lot more options in how, whether they can be feminine, masculine, things like that. Do you think that this is the case here as well, where men are culturally seen as hungry, sexually hungry, right? And if they are not seen as sexually hungry, they are not men, right? Do you think that these things are correlated at all?
yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yes, I would definitely say that. And I think that that feeds into also sort of the, I don't know, I sort of have situations sometimes where I think because there is quite a lot of general social hostility to sort of seeing men as anything but sort of sexual hungry demons.
True, that's me.
When you sort of show a man affection, I find that, for instance, recently I just smiled at a man on my doorstep, and he thought that it was an invitation to come in and that we were going to have sex. And so I think that's sort of this element of men and women not being able to actually interact with each other just as friends, or
Can I ask about that
basic
situation?
respect.
Did that?
Sorry.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but so is this a true story? You smiled at a man who's at your doorstep. You gave him a smile, and so he came in and thought you guys were going to have sex.
And?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? Like,
What if she gave him the
feel
look?
comfortable elaborating on this, because this is wild.
Oh yes, it's fine. I mean, it didn't scare me or anything. It was fine. I think a lot of these things get sorted out by just
What Jordan Peterson said here was very true. It sounds cringe, but the more desperate the man and the less sophisticated a man, the more likely he is to misinterpret even relatively benign, like, smiles, like not even flirting, but friendly gestures, as being something far more serious than they actually are. That is probably true. It wouldn't surprise me if a guy saw a smile, like, oh, she smiled, maybe she's into me, I'm gonna blah, 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 and then you get this like weird thing in your head, and it's like, it's stupid, yeah.
being honest and just talking about them honestly. But yes, I was just on my doorstep. Because of my schedule, sometimes I find myself that I walk and then see the same person. And if I see the same person,
Schedule,
then
what a
sort of
stupid
once a
fucking
week,
word.
I'll like smile.
I can't believe Bonger say this shit
whatever.
unironically.
And so I think he got this impression that because I'd sort of smiled at him and said hello to him for the last, I guess, 2 weeks, that this was his chance. So it led to him just coming up the steps and trying to start conversation, just coming in. And yes, it was cleared up quite easily. I just said, well, goodbye. It's nice seeing you. And I just shut my door. But I do think that it makes me sort of realize that for a lot of men, and just what I read even on Reddit, they're so starved of people actually just being nice to them just because they want to be nice to them, because they actually think, you are a nice person, you have, a nice face, what have you, without it being sort of perceived as sexual or necessarily having to be sexual. And I think
I shouldn't lead them up here.
That speaks more so to, I think, the socialization and just the positive reinforcements of young men as individuals, rather than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I didn't feel unsafe or anything. I mean, it was a matter of just clearing it up, and then it was like, oh, okay.
But he was, to be clear, he was clear and like, hey, you smiled at me, so you want to bang? Like,
yes, yeah. He thought that we were.
Okay.
He thought that this was an invitation.
How you knew what he was thinking. That's all. Anyway, go on.
What just happened?
Wow, dodging the rest of the convo.
Wait, am I still live?
Ahrelevant.
Hello?
Okay.
Wait, am I still live? Hello, chat? Shut down by the Matrix? Oh. Damn, I was gonna follow it up. Damn, bro, I had such a good follow up there, dude. My Discord, not yours. I had such a good fucking follow up. I was gonna be like, do you think the average guy could ever do that? Like, I don't even, like, bro, like, an average guy could smile at a woman and then have an interaction like that? There's no way, bro. There's no way. My Discord, not yours. Well, it's not gonna hit as hard because, of how this works now. Yeah, it's not gonna land as heavy, so.
Jesus. Oh my God.
It seems like she doesn't care about the difficulty levels between men and women, but it's difficulty of choosing the best option. Yeah, she seems primarily concerned with the end goal, which is...
We thought it was going to be rough time.
Men and women both want a happy relationship, and I agree with that, but, like, signs that men can get a happy relationship is if they're able to have a sexual relationship.
Okay, yeah. Apparently, gang, this is like a time limit thing.
Oh, he's on the free Zoom.
We're gonna have to, Kidology, we're gonna have to walk you through
No!
at some point.
Yes, I'm so
Good,
sorry.
fuck
yes.
you.
I was explaining to my
gimme
chat
kiss.
that this is another...
What?
Give me.
Hold on.
No, I have what I need to beat this final stage. I know we can do this.
You want Mel kisses?
Be careful. Okay, bye.
No more?
No, no more.
other involuntary thing. I do try. I've watched so
the
many
emotional
videos.
labor that I am going through right now. Anyway,
it just doesn't work. I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
we
Yes.
were doing really well. Let's get back to it, because again, we'll get, and now I know that I can just send links again if this goes again, but we'll make it. Go ahead, please.
All right. So, in the interaction that you described, I mean, do you not think that it's a little bit valuable to at least show or make the distinction that there might be some men who... Let me put it this way. Do you think the average guy is going to be able to have an interaction like that where he's going to smile at a woman neighbor and then she's going to come over and then be down to clown?
Down to clown.
I think there's just a lack generally of men interacting with women without there being this sort of assumption or this sort of idea of some kind of sexual tension or sexual aspect or sexual potential to that dynamic or that interaction. And I think that's
Back to day 38.
a lot of men in terms of actually befriending women and being friends with women.
I completely
which then
agree.
can result in the kind of socialization that could actually really benefit in terms of actual leading to that sexual interaction with a particular woman that you may want to. So yes, yeah.
What?
I'm not sure that answered the question.
Wait,
Do
what
you
was the-
believe that the average man would be able to smile at the average woman and be able to have an interaction like you did?
Have an interaction.
Like where in which the woman would be down to fuck.
If it's me, they would be. Woo yeah.
Like the average man. Well, I don't think the average man. I think in terms of this hookup culture, it's very much a thing of a very small group of people. It's not the majority experience at all. So I wouldn't say that the average man. No.
Feeling a little dodgy Dave here.
Essentially what I'm trying to get at is, do you think that there's certain behavior that women can do, and like you spoke about, and I know exactly what you're talking about, and I felt it. I remember every compliment any woman has ever given me that is earnest, because it is so
I can't keep track of how many
incredibly
times
rare.
your guys'
It's happened
moms
7
compliment me.
times in my entire life. That's it. 7. I remember all of them. However, I think that when it comes to the reverse, I don't think you would have the same response, or people would have the same response. So I'm just trying to describe, and I think a lot of people get caught up on this, because when we're talking about incels and volcels and, women and men, I don't think almost any man is going to have an interaction like what you had, where, if you were the man and the other person was the woman. And I think that kind of distinction is kind of what people are getting at, is that women are generally speaking, even unfortunately, when they're doing completely innocuous things or even just friendly things, their actions are going to be misconstrued or
Daily reminder, your mom jokes are the highest tier of humor, and the only people that can't see that are people that have no sense of humor. Always remember that. Don't let them come for your mom jokes, guys, okay? Let them come to your mom jokes.
contextualized to be something potentially flirtatious or sexual, but that also does lean credit to it being significantly more accessible for women to be able to have sex at the drop of a hat. No?
But no, the majority of women don't want to or wouldn't want to.
That's so, like, for instance, I'm not a very sexual person. I don't really want to have sex very often. That doesn't change whether or not I'm able to or not able to. And that's what involuntary versus voluntary celibacy has. Like right now, right, I could probably have sex in maybe 3 to 4 weeks if I really tried, to be able to get a sexual relationship, maybe 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, Mr.
And
Volcel.
I believe that a woman in my similar position could get it probably in
3 to 4 minutes.
4 hours.
6 hours, maybe.
Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree, but I also don't. I don't see sort of the.
What's the point?
I don't see what's to necessarily be done about that. I mean, that is sort of a.
Nothing. I don't think
It is
anything
what it
has to
is.
be. Yeah.
I feel, and I think that in terms of sort of, I think this speaks to sort of patience and sort of the different expectations and social roles, and also I'd say biology of women and men that just have to be reckoned with and understood. I think, for instance, if this gentleman who tried to have his way with me, I guess, if he'd interacted
have his way with me,
spoken to me over
bit
the next
rapey.
few weeks, asked me out on a date, you know, actually try to get to know me rather than seeing me as a potential booty call,
Booty call!
just
I'm so sorry, I'm
have
done.
a bit of fun with. I would have gone out with him, I'm sure. And who knows, maybe if we had actually had that long-term process, I would have ended up sleeping with him. Now,
Oh, he
likely
fumbled the
not.
bag.
So
Oh
it's,
no,
I think,
little bro fumbled.
So
I think it is
He's
sort of
watching the stream right now.
knowing how to play with the cards that you are dealt as a man, and also as a woman. Whether it's fair, I can't say. I don't think it is fair, but I don't necessarily think that there's a way
I really
of,
like Kidology, but this is coming across as
I
a
guess
traditionist.
fixing it.
What do you
It's
think
sort of
is-
the
Why do
way
people have
that
to
I
want sex
think
all the
that
time?
Some incels believe that
'Cause why not, bro?
it should be fixed, or that the system's rigged against them, when I think it is just purely a bit of self-awareness about modern society and about the rules and expectations
So-
for both men and women.
So what do you think is unfair about it?
I think it's unfair that I would say most men are really deprived of the kind of, I think, means of actually forming connections, especially with women, of actually being able to interact with women without being seen as a nuisance to those women, or without skepticism of their intentions. I think it's unfair that
Oh, that's true. Okay. Actually, never mind. I don't want to go into it.
that there isn't a lot of empathy, I think, for men when it comes to the difficulties of actually somehow.
So it had to do with the, like, would a guy be willing to, or would a woman be willing to date down after fucking a Chad? And actually, I hadn't thought about reversing it. It actually feels like it would be just the opposite. Let me give you an example. Sorry, so somebody sent me this message. I don't know if this is true. I'll say they're a researcher, or they were a researcher, so maybe it's true, but she didn't like a study, okay? But she says, I think the data suggests that women's self-perceived mate value is a lot more stable than men's. Like, a woman's ability to sleep with a high-value man doesn't have as much of an impact on their dating strategies. Meanwhile, men's self-perceived mate value is way more fluid depending on the attention they're getting or who they're sleeping with. Something that this is so anecdotal, so it could be wrong, but personally, I'm not a very radical, I'm not a crazy fucking person in the bedroom in terms of crazy fetishes. I'm not gonna slap anybody. Choking is very light. I'm not making anybody pass out. I don't do very much crazy stuff. But it seems like women are super willing to have different sexual relationships with different people, or at least that's my perception. That I've never met a woman who was oh yeah, I had a lot of fun with you, but God, I really wish you were into this other stuff. It sucks that we can't do that. It seems like they're kind of happy to do with whatever I'm willing to do, I guess. Whereas for men, I feel once a guy has experienced certain things, and again, this is all anecdote, but if a guy's had anal from women or whatever, and he's really into anal, that seems like a pretty high demand that he would make on future partners. That it seems harder for a guy to be yeah, there were these two girls I fucked in college, and they super loved anal, and now my current partner hates it, and I hate that. And it's it feels like for men, the standards do get raised, at least sexually a bit. But I also don't date men, so it might just be because of the type of people I date, and the type of people I tend maybe my perception is not completely true there, but I feel like that might be the case, that men's sexual standards can get raised pretty significantly from partner to partner, but women seem a bit more willing to do different things with different people. But I could be wrong, I'm not sure, but that's just anecdotally that seems to be true, at least with regards to sex.
Needing to understand women, but having absolutely no access to information.
Hello? Why? Is this a dono? What the fuck?
Back in again. But
Juicers. I like animals, cats, and gamings. I saw you from XQC's stream. Play a lot of Destiny too. Oh my god.
Hello, Fawson.
Game is
I
from
noticed
Stupid
their title says, "We are seeds away
Game
from
options.
completely destroying."
The funny thing is listen, if you saw some girl that you recognize from stream, etc., or whatever, you probably could have spun this into a conversation if you would have just like saw her at the mailbox instead of doing it with a letter like this. Why would you do this? Why would you write like a 10-page? Why would you do this? You should have just saw her at the mailbox. Like, oh shit, hey, I watch XQC stream. Were you on one of the dating shows? Oh, fun. And then like strike up a conversation that way. You could have actually done this, but now you literally took the serial killer route. Jesus.
At least information that is actually valuable and realistic, aside from pornography and I guess the internet and other very angry young men. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, and I think that's. But I don't think the way that I think some incels at least present sort of solutions to it are in any way actually going to be realistic solutions in terms of actually understanding women, and especially, most importantly, a particular woman who you want to form a relationship with in the long term.
So Ahrelevant really wants to get in on here, and I'm going to have to...
Only sees it linked once, quickly tabs away. No, this guy's linked it like 50 million fucking times. Wait, hold on. He's linked this at least 5 fucking times. How do I see this guy's logs? How is that a Muslim joke? Hold on. How do I, can somebody search? I don't know how to fucking work this dog shit fucking website. Oh, username, this, channel, destiny.gg, text. Today, submit. I guess I do know how to work this dog shit website. He's linked it 8 times today. New Muslim discourse dropped. Destiny thoughts, Destiny, Omega lol, Sweatstiny, Destiny, Omega lol, damn, Muslims out to get you, for real. New Muslim Discord dropped. He's linked this like fucking 8 times today. Fuck you guys. Jesus.
Let him, Ahrelevant, go ahead.
So yeah.
Okay, Ahrelevant, this is a lesson for you. Sometimes you just gotta do it, right?
Yeah, but that's usually in a panel format, not usually in
understand.
one. Okay, but so this was kind of something that I took away from the video that you had done post your conversation with Steven that has kind of sat with me, and it was one of the newer things that I wanted to address. And it seems like it came through in the story that you told. Do you believe that any person that wants to just have a casual sexual relationship with a woman just wants a booty call?
So could you repeat that?
Any man that wants a casual sexual relationship with a woman, are they just like, do they just want a booty call, or can you genuinely care about a person but also not want a serious relationship with a person?
No, what? Wait, what?
Yes, I think you can, but I think you need to make that very clear from the get-go. And I think that, at least in my experiences, men haven't made that clear because if they...
Wait, I don't know what he's talking about.
Clear, then there's not going to be sex. Because sex, at least for me, and I would say for most women who I've interacted with, it's a far more sacred experience and interaction that we have.
Sure.
The man has to be quite exceptional to us, and is definitely an exception to the rule and to everyone if we are going to have sex with them.
Yeah, so that's a great point that I would like to come back to as well, put a pin in that. But the thing about...
I don't think... oh, Jesus, hold on. I don't know what anybody stands for anymore. I don't think incels are looking for friends with benefits. I thought that the problem with an incel is that... maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't know. I thought that incel didn't actually have anything to do with sex. Like, being an incel doesn't have to do with, like, just getting sex from somebody. That's actually, like, the least important part. Because you could just go hire a prostitute for sex. The point of being an incel is that you feel like you are fundamentally cut off from the intimacy that follows having close and oftentimes sexual relationships with women. That's what it means to be an incel. That's what I thought it was. It's not just a matter of, like, I just want to fuck somebody. It's like the dating and romantic aspect of it. That was my understanding. But sometimes when I hear people talk about it, they're just like, it's just like about like, just sex? I don't know.
Just we were addressing. If a man is capable of genuinely seeing you as an equal human being, but maybe they're not in the right place to be able to have a relationship, maybe they're going through a transitionary period in their life, and they want to have, you know, a relationship with you that includes sex, but is not going to lead to marriage or anything like that, then do you believe that many involuntarily celibate women are going to have that option? So like, for instance, you believe you're involuntarily celibate, right? Okay. Do you believe that you could find a guy who genuinely cares about you, but is not in a place right now where in which they want a long-term relationship with you and will have sex with you?
Yes, yes. But at the same time, if I, for instance, because right now, there's probably only one guy there's one guy who I would actually be able to have sex with.
Okay.
And the likelihood of me having sex with this guy is nil.
Okay.
So that's not going to happen. But would a guy, if I were
Literally
to
one
actually
guy.
be in a relationship with a guy, if I were to say, I want a relationship, but I'm not ready to have sex, probably
Do you have
for,
farms
I
yet?
guess,
No.
let's say like a year.
Okay.
Do you think he would accept that?
I think-
as like a sort of a counter question, for instance.
I think
I don't.
No, I think 99% of men will not accept that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, hold on. Fuck. Well, now I'm not sure who I agree with. If you told the average incel, listen, I can give you a woman to date and she'll be your girlfriend and you can go out and hang out with her and you guys can cut all that, but she's not gonna have sex with you for 1 year. Wouldn't an average incel be like, okay, fuck it, I'll do it, I'll take it? Wouldn't that be acceptable or no? Now I'm wondering if I overplay the relationship aspects of sexual stuff. I feel like they would. I feel like the answer would be yes.
And so I think that's something, that's sort of an element of commonality of, I think, sort of
Well,
a different conclusion, but sort of a common journey insofar as sort of our different problems
So I think-
that we may have as men and women.
Yeah, I think this is the key difference, though. You are an incel who has access to an individual who you've stated can have access to an individual who genuinely cares about them, but just isn't in a position to be able to have a long-term relationship. An incel definitionally can't have that, because if they have that, then they're not an incel. So do you understand at least why there's a lot of people who really want to draw the difference between a woman who's an incel and a man who's an incel? Because you can have a positive, intimate relationship with another person. You can. Most women can, right? But an incel cannot. Because of, and I want to bring it back to what you said, you have to find exceptional people. You said that earlier, right? Like women typically are going to have to find exceptional people. And that's really what is captured in the incel experience. It's not even that, like, you aren't accepted. It's that nobody.
Why don't you upgrade to stone walls? I
finds you
don't have the
exceptional.
upgrade yet.
Not one person. That's why you remember every smile a woman gives you. It's because there's a glimmer of hope that maybe this is going to be the change. Maybe for once a woman will find me exceptional.
Look at how many incels are in the friend zone. Yeah, that's a good point too, because like keep in mind, even though it sounds weird, oh dude, I never know where people are at. The friend zone doesn't actually have anything to do with having sex, right? Do people realize that, right? When you get friend zoned by a woman, it's not that when you hit on a woman and you're like, yo, do you want to fuck? She's like, no, I'm good. That's not what it means to be friend zoned. Friend zone is when you're like friends with a woman for months and you think you're building towards a relationship and then you're not. And she's like, ooh, I just see you as a friend. And you're like, oh, fuck. That's the friend zone, right? The friend zone, it kind of plays into sex because like you'll have sex with people that you're dating, but like friend zoning somebody does not just mean that you wouldn't fuck them. Like if I'm chatting with a girl for like a day or two and then on day 3 I try to like up the sexual tension and I like make a sexual joke. I'm like, hey, like, well, do you want to come over? And she's like, I don't really know. I don't think that I like, no, I'm not into it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not like getting friend zoned. I think friend zone is like you talk to a girl for months and you think you're building towards something like romantic, and then you're like, hey, do you want to, take this to the next level? And she's like, take it to the next level? I just see you as a friend. That's like getting friend zoned. You're like, oh shit.
But then it doesn't work out. And that's, I think, what incels are trying to hold on to when they're trying to show the difference between women incels and men incels.
Okay, so about exceptionality. That exceptionality is more so about...
If a guy is denied to fuck an ugly girl, is he still an incel? What if a guy's denied to fuck 50? If a guy denies to fuck an ugly girl, then no. I mean, like, you should be within your range. But I don't know if... I don't think incels are people that could fuck a lot of ugly chicks and just choose not to. I think you'd be different. You'd be like an Elliot Rogers type at that point. Hassan Slur Stunlock.
More fragile about a white identity that you do not understand than a fucking Nazi, the ultimate white identitarian. Like, Nazis are at the literal last, the final boss of white identity, okay? Straight up. So it's crazy to like turn around and try to censor the word cracker specifically so that you can, get an argument in edgewise. It's a very silly situation. But words are defined socially, And maybe in the future, if there's enough white fragility, people could potentially genuinely create a movement surrounding the censorship of the word cracker.
Does that mean that because you're so set against the word, because you're so set against the N-word, does that mean that you're saying that only exists because of black fragility? These slur arguments are so stupid. If you think that racial slurs are bad, then just don't use them. Do you think that one day black people can become strong enough that we can use the N-word? Like, this argument is so fucking weird. Like, we're gonna say cracker until white people get mad enough about it?
It's laughable. It's hilarious. Okay? But the historical association with the word, the etymology...
The historical association? Bro, at this point, the N-word has shown up in more rap songs than have come out of, like, fucking slavers' mouths. Come on, what do you mean the historical association?
...of the word and the difference of said word or word...
This argument is so stupid. It's so brain dead. Oh my God, it's so brain dead.
For me, it doesn't hold as much weight, I think, as it does for sort of the incel experience. This idea of sort of somebody being exceptional is more so just a guy who I'm friends with, who I've been...
Yeah, this is an example of how people like Hassan can call themselves like kind of edgy, but they're safe edgy in the most like corporate fucking politically safe way. And it's like, wow, really, bro? You get edgy about shitting on white people? Oh my God, bro. You're so fucking brave, dude. You're so brave, man. Talking about how cool it is to say cracker. Whoa, man, I hope one day we can all be as fucking brave as you are online, dude.
Able to formulate a relationship with as a friend, that they're exceptional, and therefore I feel a lot more comfortable with them, and therefore I'm more likely to have sex with them because we've established that I have distinguished them from all other men in the world, right? They are individuals.
What corporation shits on white people? Bro, how many times in fucking media do you get comments where people are like, oh, white, look at in the fucking Velma show, look at the last fucking Batman movie, like another rich white guy, blah, blah, blah. I know it made sense in the movie, but I'm just saying, like, you hear comments like this all the time. Who are you trying to fool, motherfucker? We all exist in this culture. What do you mean? It's like so commercially safe to like make fun of like white people and shit. Not there's anything wrong with that, by the way. Fuck white people, make fun of them all you want, that's great. But you should be able to make fun of everybody if you're gonna do that shit. Okay, hold on, we're surviving this time.
Individuals. I think that's all I mean by being exceptional, as opposed to, I think with incels, I think in order to get to that point of actually having sex, you have to be able to actually individualize human beings. You have to find a woman who is not woman. You have to stop catering to these caricatures, to these hyperbolic notions of woman. And I think that is, you've lost playing the game when it comes to that.
Two things. One, I'm not sure I understood what you just said. Could you please rephrase that? I'm like an individual who's not an individual. Are you saying, and this is what I think you said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that incels, male incels, see women as caricatures rather than as individuals, and so they can't identify with that. Is that close, or?
Yes, basically. And I think that's the problem. If you can't perceive the other exceptionally, if you can't interact with the other, that is woman, as sort of exceptions, actually take the time, a lot of patience, a lot of effort, a lot of rejection, a lot of insecurities and issues in order to try and individualize a woman out of the herd of women, then sort of expecting that exceptionality and that sort of exceptional response back, it's not going to happen.
Do you
that's
think
what I'm trying to say. That makes sense?
I understand, but do you think that's a reasonable expectation to have when it comes like on a general level? Like when I meet someone, right? When I'm I'm looking for a relationship. I don't know the individual until I get to know them. And for me to invest my time, energy in getting to know someone and being in a relationship, like I have to start from start from a generality. I have to start from a generality of a caricature of what I want, right? Of what I want in a person, right? Like I want X, Y, Z, like a general kind of goal or an ideal. And then as you go, you kind of drill down. So I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just misunderstanding what your prescription is here. Like, can you just give us a clear prescription? What should incels do to help themselves?
What should incels do to help themselves?
Yes, to be better.
I think firstly, stop believing that what men find attractive and perceive to be attractive in other men equates to what women
free my boy
therefore see as attractive in men. I think there is this obsession with masculinity on the part of incels and a very particular view of masculinity, which very much does not align itself to the majority female experience in what women actually viably you can see what they look for in partners, in men. I think it's very subsumed in evolutionary psychology.
Do you not think
in
Yeah, can you give me some examples?
Yeah.
the height thing, the idea of
Ahrelevant's about to lose it.
80-20 rule based on OkCupid and Tinder statistics. I think especially I would say racial aspects. I think in terms of sort of race getting in the way of, for instance, actually individualizing an individual member from a race and actually.
I'll ask you directly. Do you not think that women have height preferences that they enforce? Right, like that they like you mentioned that as something that they don't. That's kind of like men need to just kind of get over. But I don't know if
no, I don't say men need to get over it. No.
Okay.
I do recognize it, especially on social media, as being something that can cause great anxiety. But in terms of realistically, are women only dating men of a particular height? That is the majority of women. No, I mean, no. So I think are women also only dating men who look like a child?
Do you think a 6-foot man has a better chance than a 5'2" man of getting a date in general?
Of getting a date?
Yeah, just in general, of having a woman be interested in them. A 6-foot man versus someone who is 5'2", a man who is 5'2". Do you think one has an easier time than the other?
An easier time than the other?
Yeah, just getting.
I hate it when she repeats the question. Like, it's so hard to understand. It's one. I don't know if she does it intentionally. It's one thing she does where she'll like repeat. Sometimes people do this. They repeat back a question, and what didn't make sense about it? It was a very obvious question. She'll be like, and then they just repeat it back, and it triggers the fuck out of me. Sorry.
Romantic relationship.
Oh, it would depend on a lot of things. I mean, there's some really tall, scrawny.
Okay, I understand, but we're isolating.
Yeah, we're just isolating.
We're isolating the variables. So you have 6-foot Ahrelevant and you have 5'2" Ahrelevant. Okay, you have these two same in every aspect. One is 6
foot. It would depend on my height. I mean, for instance, I'm 5 foot, so I don't care.
You're 5 foot tall?
Everyone's taller than me.
Jesus.
Sorry.
I didn't know.
Tiny.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's hard
Yes,
to tell
exactly.
online,
You know,
but
I think that's the thing. Looks can be so deceiving. You know, it really doesn't. And I think for the majority of women in the West are pretty short. Okay, so in terms of this idea that we're only looking for men who are 6 foot and over, it's ludicrous.
Well, so
on social media, it gets a lot of women clicks if they, just say, I only date guys who are X, Y, and Z, but tall. In terms of the reality of it, the reality of people actually really forming an intimate connection with the person who they love and who they, commit themselves to in the long term. 9 out of 10, 9 over 10% of the time, it just is not.
I know that she's not like left or right. I'm not trying to like politically like pigeonhole her there. You have to be able to answer these questions. Like being tall is a little bit of an advantage, of course. I think I generally agree with what she's saying, but like don't be evasive with the question. Like, yeah, all else equal, being tall is probably better, but being tall is not going to be like the deal breaker or like the selling point for like a relationship. Like you just have to say it like that. Like it's pretty simple. Don't run from it.
The case that your preferences are actually fulfilled well and truly by what you present out there in the world generically.
So I agree that there's going to be a lot of women who say, I'll only date a guy who's like 6 foot or whatever, and then they end up in like a string of relationships with guys who are 5'9" or something like that. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to, right? Is that there's preferences that we state, but for the most part, you're going to be able to be fine. But just to really...
It's a joke in the absurdity of it, yeah.
Because I felt like Wick gave a laughably true example of 5'2" versus 6 foot. These people live radically different lives, right? Like, a 5'2" man is going to be because usually when we're talking about the 5'9" guy versus the 6 foot guy, it's generally speaking because of what you were talking about. You're generally going to be taller than most women, and as long as you're taller, you'll be okay. Like that's where the line really is. As long as you're taller than most women or the woman that you're interacting with, you'll generally be okay. Like same height or taller. But like a 5'2" guy, he's shorter than most women. Do you really think he's going to have anywhere near the same dating options, even IRL, as this 6 foot tall guy?
That's when you focus on different things. You find different assets of yourself that make you exceptional. That's when you focus on other aspects of yourself. And I think that this is the problem with sort of this incel rhetoric and discourse. This idea that there's only certain things that make up masculinity and that are important and that nothing else matters. And if you don't fall into this particular notion,
I agree with that.
You're screwed.
I agree with that.
Destiny, are you heading to Wales?
It's not absolute, but
If
they
so, where?
generally...
Also, I emailed you recently, not sure if you read it. Thanks and love you.
Haven't I publicly stated? I'll stay before I go.
To true things that are generally true. If you are more attractive, if you are more masculine, if you are more taller, if you are more wealthy, if you are more buff, if you have a better physique, generally, for the most part, you're going to have much more success. It's going to be much harder. The further you go away from that kind of ideal, the further away. Like that's why I gave the examples of 5'2", right? We're looking at the extremes.
I don't deny that at all. But I think it's the same. I can't be like for instance, I can't be a supermodel. I'm not tall enough to be a supermodel. I'm not skinny enough, and that's just the way that it is. But I think that in that. I look at other aspects of my life that I can be successful in, that I can distinguish myself, that I can be exceptional at. And I think that's what men need to do as well, more so. I think that the difference is that I do, again, believe that there's far more options for women to be exceptional than there are at the moment for men. And so I must definitely empathize on that. But I do think that I don't think that this idea that sort of like height and all these different things that are just perpetuated constantly on these forums are as tangible, as paramount as they are presented.
So I
That's
think I
true.
actually potentially disagree with the idea that there's more ways for women to be exceptional than there are men, at least when it comes to dating. But we can come back to that because
Dating, I would agree with you on that.
Okay,
I think just in
okay,
general,
okay,
in general.
okay.
And I think that feeds into dating inevitably in terms of making you a more attractive person, just as being an exceptional individual.
For the sake of the conversation, I want to focus on the first thing. We can get to the dating thing in a minute, right? But I want to focus on
Okay.
what
So
we're talking about.
the big thing that because what it felt like was just done is you're taking something that I believe is a pretty wild difference in how people live their lives. Like a 5'2" guy lives honestly an entirely different life to the 6' guy, right? And I agree with you that the 5'2" guy is supposed to, like, he should try and make himself exceptional in other ways. But the cold fact of the matter is you're gonna have to make yourself exceptional in other ways to be even equal to the 6' guy. It feels like right now we're looking at like, I always bring up this example whenever we talk about this. It's like me walking up to like an obese woman who is like crying about not being desirable, and I'm going, just be nicer, and your dating options are going to increase. Like, yeah, you can work on your personality, but it doesn't change the material fact that like you're going to have to be really exceptional to be anywhere close to like some of these other people. Not saying with just height specifically, but that difference of height is fucking insane. A 10-inch height difference is crazy. But I'm talking about like, yeah, just
These guys are talking about
I agree
very
with you.
low
If you are
percentage of
lacking in
men
some
though.
areas, you're
Like
gonna need to
5'2" or
build
whatever the
yourself
fuck they were talking.
up
That's
in
a
those
really,
areas.
really, really
I
small,
agree.
like very abnormally
Just-
small
it
guy.
almost
No
feels like
offense.
we're kind of treading into the minimizing of those differences, because the original point that we came up on is the things that men consider to be masculine are not things that women actually select for in dating. And I actually think I agree with you on some of those things, but not all of them. Like for instance, there's many different men who think I'm sure. Do you know? I'm not sure. Do you know who the Mr. Olympia is? You know Mr. Olympia, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff.
Yes.
That guy. So many guys think like that's the apex of physical. There's many women that's too much. You know, that's way too much. So I agree with that. But like for the most part, it seems like men are pretty correct. I think most men, for example, do you know who Hassan Piker is?
Yes.
Yeah, most men would say that guy's a Chad because he fits most of the masculine traits, and most of the women agree. Like he fits the height really well. He has a really good face structure, good facial hair, good haircut stuff.
Most women would agree.
I think most women would find that guy to be extremely attractive. Yes.
Well, I think this is the important thing. I think you need to distinguish between sort of physically. If I just saw a picture of Hassan, I think, yes, he's attractive. Then I watch his streams. Suddenly, attractive to me. So,
Jesus.
you know, I think that's another thing that men really do need to consider, that I think in all of this is just lacking. This idea of who you are as a person.
I agree.
Your personality, your treatment of others, you know, who you are.
That only matters, Kidology, that only matters after you get in the door.
Exactly.
That only matters after you get in the door.
That's what I want to nail with Wick exactly, is it only matters if you get the shot in the first place. So I'm bringing it back to the overweight woman because I love this example. Like you're telling her to be nicer. That's what you're saying, have a better personality. The issue is that nobody gives a fuck about her personality because they don't even care to get to know her long enough to be able to see her personality. So we gotta talk about the minimums, and I agree that the minimums are not very high for men to be able to hit for the most part. So I'm not like black belt or anything. I don't think you need to be a 6'3" Giga Chad.
Ahrelevant,
to be able to
really?
hit the minimums for women. I don't think you need to do any of that. I think for the most part you can get away with finding clothes that fit you. Make sure that you shave the hair on your neck, shit like that. That's going to, for the most part, yeah, Wick, I'm looking at you, my man. I'm looking at you. All right.
Look, I can hit. I don't want you sort of casting shade. Keep my name out of your mouth. I'm fine. Like, there's an normie in this conversation and incel and a femcel, okay? And I'll let you guys decide too.
Wick is slaying.
So, yeah, that's that's where I'm at with it. Is that I don't think there's a crazy amount of work that needs to be done, but I think for the most part, men do clock pretty well what a lot of women are interested in, at least physically. Yeah, I think height.
Yes, but in terms of where that goes, like again, that's only important insofar as getting your foot in the door. And based on how many women are not on dating apps, clearly that doesn't matter. Clearly they care about what comes after, because dating apps are basically about the profile and the picture, actually the picture above all. It's about that first impression. And men's over-reliance, I think, on dating apps and being on dating apps and thinking that somehow there's going to be a different outcome, even though the vast majority of women are not on dating apps. I think it's quite telling of the different sort of approaching to relationships that men v women have, and where there is sort of a disalignment between them and between sort of the importance placed with men on that sort of that getting in the door relative to, I think, women's main concern with everything that is sort of
but
beyond
you're pointing
that.
to this main concern, but what I'm trying to communicate here, right, is that none of the main concerns even matter if you can't pass that first test. It's like a funnel, okay? So you have like a vast majority that can get into the door, and then they'll select further. So
did somebody say a sales
initial
funnel?
Impressions, and then after that you have long-term compatibility, and after that it gets even smaller and you narrow it down. But the problem he's saying is, even off the apps, because you mentioned this in your statement, like they go on these apps expecting a different outcome. Off the apps, they are having this same problem where they cannot. It doesn't matter if they are Casanovas when it comes to speaking, if they're charming as fuck. It does not matter because they are being rejected before they even get that far. They are being looked over, passed over because they do not meet the minimum standards for looks or what masculinity that women have, and it is an actual problem. And I again,
in the real world,
yeah, in the real world,
I don't think as much at all as online. Definitely not online. It's far different in terms of the short men who are holding hands with women in public everywhere around me. It's very telling that in terms of actual relationships happening in the real world, I think a lot more men are actually getting in the door than is at least perpetuated online.
Sure, but we're talking about the exceptions, right? We're talking about the incels. Like, most people aren't incels. Just most people aren't incels. So we're talking about those people who don't get in the door. We're talking about those individuals, the exceptions to the rule, the minority, the 10% or 5%. I don't even know what the percentage is, right? But that small minority, and for them, it absolutely does matter. And I can understand why you would say that online this gets signal boosted more than it is in real life, because that's just how social media works. But at the same time, I just feel it feels dismissive to me in a way that I think demonstrates kind of a lack of, I don't know, lack of understanding of the basic problem. But I could be wrong. I could be misunderstanding here, so that's very possible. But anyway, Ahrelevant.
Yeah, so I think from my point of view, I agree that there is a significant difference to real life than there is dating apps. I think there is a pretty significant difference when it comes to the approach. I think you can just genuinely see it if you've ever seen somebody.
Ooh, you can just see it, calling her blind.
Getting the foot in the door. I wouldn't say that it's primarily. I mean, there is a looks component, but I think that a lot of what makes an incel is poor social skills. I think it's the people who have crippling levels of social anxiety that prevent them from being able to approach women. And for men, that's a death sentence. So if you can't approach a woman and talk to her, you have to do online dating. And if you're doing online dating, you're losing. So like already, that's really what it is. So the advice for like incels is really just going to have to be that you're going to have to overcome your social anxiety. I think it's part of the reason why we see more male incels than we do female incels, because there is a unique burden on men to approach women than there is the inverse.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there is a disparity in that sort of psychological labor that needs to be done in order to actually confront that social anxiety and to actually deal with it, and to actually, I think, in that sense, you are inevitably, I think with everything and with all humans, you just face a lot more rejection than you do success. And I think in that sense, it's very tricky to try to overcome something by actually having to confront being faced with the very thing that just exacerbates what you are suffering with. So yeah. No, I do definitely sympathize with that. But in terms of, I think the sympathy can only go so far. I think I can only sympathize insofar as seeing that, yes, there is this difference and that society is rough and for men and women. But in this case, I can definitely see it's rough for men, especially for incels.
No.
But I think there has to be...
I didn't mean to unload all these.
Realizing, I think also including with myself, for instance, my stuntedness, say that is something that I have to deal with. And I think the same with that kind of social anxiety and the fear of rejection. That is something that you have to...
What do you mean when you say deal with, and when it comes to social rejection and anxiety and things? What do you mean when you say deal
It unloaded all my fucking...
I think with men, say, like with men or with me.
So a man who is socially stunted, right, and who just, for whatever reason, cannot approach women, when you say they just have to kind of deal with it, do you mean just kind of like get over it, just get over their fears and just go up? Like, what are you saying exactly?
Oh, no, I definitely don't dive into the deep end. But in terms of doing things that sort of enable you to interact, especially with women in social environments, preferably like low pressure ones, such as volunteering or joining a sports team, or going on sort of meetups, like group meetups where you have to interact with people and talk to people, where you can see sort of people's social cues, how they interact, etc., where it isn't about I guess dating as the end goal, where there is just that means to actually talk to people, get to know people, especially the opposite sex. I think that's very important. And I think there's, online there isn't a lot of opportunity for that. In the real world, there's a lot more opportunity for that. And I think it's important to do these things. These should just be basic social things that society makes way for people to actually be able to engage with. But alas, I think people do have to put in that labor of actually finding these environments, these groups, to actually try and interact.
Can I bring it back to the
bring it
original
back.
prompt?
You can, but we're about to drop again, so I'm going to send you more links once we do. Once we drop, so don't be scared when it happens. I'm just seeing the timer and it's... Yeah.
All right, so in the whole point of this, or at least a large portion of it, was supposed to be to discuss whether or not there is a significant difference between femcel, or women who are incels, and men who are incels. As we previously addressed, women who are incels can have a positive relationship with men. Because even if you are, let's say, so out of the social norm that most people will not find you as a long-term desirable dating partner, you can still find people who genuinely care about you but are not in a place to be able to look for a long-term partner that would be happy to engage in an intimate relationship with you. Maybe not even like necessarily just sexual, but like some kind of an intimate relationship with you. And it seems like men who are incels are incapable of doing that. Do you not believe that difference in and of itself is worthy of a distinction between male incels and female incels?
I think it's worthy of a distinction, but only to an extent. I think that
Sure.
the problem with that distinction is that it undermines room for empathy and room for an appreciation that we actually have a lot more in common in terms of our problems, in terms of our successes as human beings, than we do differences based on sex.
We're so
And I
close,
think at the
guys. We can
moment,
do this.
People are far too invested in these polarities between us that it just leads to, I think, resentment and animosity toward each other. This idea that incels think that they deserve sex and that women are, for instance, entitled or have it better or control the means to sex, etc. And I think it just leads to a lack of the nuance that is needed in order to actually get to some kind of realistic resolution between all of us.
So if we agree with the previously established point that most women, even those who do not fit within the social standards of what would be typically required of women to be able to get a long-term relationship, are capable of having a positive, intimate relationship with men that they desire, right? If we agree with that being the case and that men cannot do the same thing, would it not be that de facto women are entitled to that?
I'd agree with that if you didn't say positive.
You don't believe that? So like for you, for instance, you don't believe that you could find somebody to have a positive, intimate relationship with?
I don't think that. I think that's that has a sort of normative value to it. I don't think. No, I wouldn't say positive. No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, if that were the case, I think a lot more women would be in relationships. A lot more young women would be in relationships. I think a lot of the negative relationships and interactions that we've had with men, especially young men, especially when we're sort
Thoughts
of
on this
at the
debate so
height
far?
of our
Boring.
sexual market
They need to
value,
be. We need more blood sports.
really undermines that. So I would say yes, that majority have access to, I would say, either negative or just sexual relations with men. I wouldn't call them positive though.
So you wouldn't agree that right now you could have a positive relationship with a guy
No, my
that might not turn into long-term. It might just be a short-term thing. This is where I was talking about the other thing. You don't believe that you could have a positive relationship that way? It's not positive because it's not long-term? It's not positive? I don't know. Why is it positive?
No. I think because of issues that I have with my sexuality, with sort of, I guess we could call it trauma, I think I would say that if we're talking generically, with most men, it would be negative. I think with a particular men, just based on our individual, very specific personal dynamic, it could be positive. But I'd say that would be a minority experience of it being positive. So, yes.
So I agree that that's going to be a difficult thing to find, but I think it's quite realistically possible if you try or potentially look in like the right places. Do you disagree?
Yeah, and I
that
think you could say the same for incels as well.
Relevant, real quick, a question for you. What would be the right places, right? Like the right places.
I think more progressive communities are probably going to have better people for having short-term relationships that aren't just like super, I'm just going to use you and kick you to the curb. I think that progressives are going to be a little bit more open to, women having casual sexual experiences in general. And so you're probably going to face disproportionately less shaming and things like that, if I had to guess. So like looking for more progressive guys, probably.
What do you think about that, Kidology? What are your thoughts on that, on progressive spaces being a better place for women to find these more positive encounters?
Progressive spaces.
More specifically, progressive people.
Probably not. Fuck that.
Oh.
You can just say no if you disagree, because that's fine, right?
Just say no.
No, I find it a bit of a complex question because I do tend to see sort of progressive
Put a pin
sexual.
in that. We're about to drop, so I'm going to leave and make a new room, and we'll answer it right when we get back. Give me a second, gang. I'm sorry. This is Scout, so we do what we can.
I'm so sorry about this. Okay, there we go.
My Discord, not yours.
My Discord.
It didn't end. We're not ending. We're just, again, it lets me have 45 minutes. And I ain't paying for this shit.
Okay, this lookout tower sucks.
Hopefully, I sent her the link.
Long range rifle.
Because I'm curious.
Oh, actually, this
I will
seems
say though,
kinda cool.
I think I disagree with you on this because most sexual
Maybe?
scandals and stuff happen all the time in these progressive spaces. Like it's every other day you're getting some progressive being accused of being a sex pest. I don't know, but that's just neither here nor there. Anyway, welcome back.
Barricades.
Oh yes, and also I think a lot of progressive sex and sexuality has now sort of gone into it's just become. I think the market has taken over sort of these
Ooh,
arguments.
maybe
And
barricades
now,
are good?
We have the proliferation of the sex toy market, for instance, and this idea that sort of the objective of sex is purely to orgasm. And I do understand that there's most definitely a disparity in terms of the pleasure that women get from sex. But in terms of this idea now, that I don't need a man because I've got my dildo. I think.
The Ballista Tower and Shock Tower broken. Where's Ballista Tower?
Not as much as pornography, but I think in terms of sort of bringing the market into sex, I think it's a lot easier to just get off with a sex toy than it is to actually really the labor, the emotional, very vulnerable labor with a partner in order to get to sort of, I guess, the same conclusions. I don't want to speak too generically about this because everybody's different. And I think this should be a personal thing between you and your partners.
What?
But I think for me personally, I think it's just another instance of the market coming into the domain of life, which I don't agree with.
I'm sorry for sidetracking.
Oh, mechanized weapons.
I was curious how that related. Ahrelevant, did you want to continue your line of questioning?
Yeah, sure. So, then just to clarify things, you don't believe that you can have a positive sexual relationship with a guy? You don't believe that's realistic?
At this point in time, no.
Okay.
Jesus.
Do you believe most femcels are capable of finding a person that would be nice to them or kind to them, but
are greater
just not wanna
ballistas
date them
good
long term,
or no?
and capable of having a positive sexual relationship?
That's a very generic question. I think
So the reason why I ask is because definitionally, again, the difference between a male incel and a female incel I want to draw here is that a guy cannot. Because if he has a positive sexual relationship with a woman, there's like a 95% chance that that woman's interested enough to be able to start a relationship.
Gives you one at the start of the mission. Extra building in the
again, I'm just trying to draw a distinction, right? So I typically refer to female incels as femcels.
Right,
is how I typically refer to them as. I know you've done a video on that, but
get farms.
The way that I see it is to just kind of offer my 2 cents on the situation. I agree with you that at the end of the day, what people really care about is feeling genuinely desired and wanting.
I need a workshop to unlock farms.
And for a lot of men, sex is going to be a sign that that's what's happening from a woman. So that's how it works. Generally speaking, if a woman has sex with you, you are probably going to be able to develop that into a relationship. It's kind of a big sign that says you're enough, you've made it. And for women, it's not. And so typically, when I'm talking about femcels, it's because I think the vast majority of women are capable of having sex pretty much whenever they want. However, they are not capable of developing those sexual interactions into relationships. There's a fair chunk of women that have significantly hard times developing sexual relationships into intimate partnerships. That is a very real phenomenon, and that's what I would refer to as femcels. But I think there is a difference between femcels and incels.
Yes, in that regard, yes, I do agree with you. Yes.
Okay, and I think that what most people are typically getting at is exactly what I described, which is that pretty much most women are capable of having sex whenever they want, right? Barring,
Yes, but most women don't.
Correct.
I don't understand why this is so important. Because it's sort of like making a point, like, okay, you can have sex whenever you want. Okay, but I'm not doing that. So what are you getting from this? It just seems like another argument.
It's only important if you're not getting it in a lot of ways, right? Like,
well, but women don't want it. That's her point.
Most women aren't having sex, but the fact that you can at any point, I think, does have a marked difference on
how you
view the world, how you interact, etc. I don't know.
Yeah, so like the way that I've described it is complete invisibility versus potentially, which is most of the time it's going to be sexual objectification with a hint of people caring. This is what I was getting at earlier, where I was asking you, do you think that there's going to be some men who would have sex with even very undesirable women, but genuinely care about them and not treat them like garbage? If the answer is yes to that, then we could probably agree that very undesirable women are probably going to get treated like garbage for the vast majority of the time, but there is a chance that you can be treated like a decent human being inside of that interaction. But for an incel, you have no positive intimate relationships with women at all. In any way, shape, or form, because you don't have sex. And so that complete intimacy and invisibility is significant, I think.
Okay, I think it's just a different form of invisibility, because there are lots of men who are very good looking, who have sex with women who they will not admit to having sex with because they consider them ugly and just average woman.
When will blue hair leave?
That's invisibility, a different kind of invisibility.
Yep,
that's very insulting to to women, for instance, that sort of shame of having slept with them or what have you. I think it's
yeah, but how many men would opt to have sex with a woman if you're like, okay, you can have sex with this woman, but she's going to be really embarrassed about it? I think a lot of guys are like, that's okay. She'll live.
Different kind of invisibility, but I think
you.
there can be an empathetic sort of crossroads, or not crossroads, but sort of bridge built between men and women, which I think is missing from this whole thing of sort of women can have sex whenever they want to, because I think this just places so much value on sex as this thing and makes it sort of this like sort of holy grail, which it just ought not to be.
It kind of is a really big deal to men, though. Again, it is that sign that a woman is genuinely interested in you. No? Sex is a very significant signifier that a woman is interested in you and probably would be interested in progressing a relationship with you. If you're consistently able to get sex, the chance that you're not consistently able to get relationships is practically zero as a man. So it's a very good indicator of relationship success as a man. For a woman, I agree. It has almost no indicator value. It has like no value as an indicator for
Yes.
almost anything.
Yes, but I think this is something that men need to navigate a lot better than they are, at least now online, in terms of seeing this as ultimately being what is of a relationship and a measure of its success and a measure of how effective and how meaningful it is as a union between two people. I think far too much value is placed on
I agree.
sex, especially on, I would say, again, the sort of caricature of sex that is presented by the oversaturation of pornography, which I think is really misconstruing actual sex and what it is and what it can be between two people and their personal interactions with each other, especially for young men. And so I think that's generically the qualm that I have with this,
So can
this
I?
rhetoric.
Yeah. So can I build a little bit off it, because previously you had established that it's pretty unempathetic the way that most people talk about having sex and that women can just have sex, and it's kind of baked with the assumption that women get anywhere near the same amount of validation and essentially just positive interaction as men do. And I agree, that is probably a majority opinion, that women get a similar amount of satisfaction and enjoyment and validation out of sex than that men do, which isn't
no,
the
we
case.
don't get
Yeah, I know
as much at all.
I know it
Yes,
isn't,
yes.
but I believe it's
Yeah.
most people's understanding that women do. I think most people probably believe that that's the case, or at
Do
least
they?
incels. But
Incel that. Majority of women do not believe that at all.
okay, yeah. Well, sure.
I think the majority of men believe that, even
actually,
incels.
I'm not sure I agree, because
right?
I think
But-
I've met plenty of women who think this, then go on like a quote unquote hot girl summer, and then find that it isn't the case. I think there's a lot of branding that tells women that they're, go be like the boys and fuck a bunch of people, and it's going to feel just as great as when guys going out there and doing it. But because of the dynamics of how it works, slut shaming, stuff like that, it just tends to not be as enjoyable for women. So I think there are some
yes, and
young
also
women.
the sex itself is just,
Sure.
I think,
Yep.
sex itself, it's very difficult for it to be enjoyable for women, which is
Correct.
why the man has to be, well, the majority of women, sort of the right man or a right man.
And again, I want to again put a pin in that one. But the thing for me is I think that there is that perception that sex is somewhat that way, and I don't believe that meets merit inside of material reality. So I understand what you're saying when you talk about the difference there. But I'm going to push back on what you said, where it's not empathetic to look at the things that we have in common, incels and femcels. I think it's also unempathetic to not look at the differences and how those differences manifest. I agree, femcel invisibility and incel invisibility are two separate things, and they confer two separate experiences. One thing that I try to communicate quite often is I don't believe one is better than another. I actually don't. I think they each confer very different lived experiences that can have very positive or negative effects. Having the vast majority of the attention that you get be, sexual objectification or, a reducing of your humanity can be, it can make you want to be truly invisible. It can make you want to be just completely, not be seen at all. And then there's, of course, people who are, completely invisible that would like beg for any bit of attention that they would get. But I don't think that there's one that's is better than another. I think there are different lived experiences that are going to affect specific people differently, right?
Yes, but I think in that, there's obviously, I think that just points to the fact that this is very nuanced and incredibly personal and private to a lot of people in ways that can't just be sort of segregated into groups of difference, which then leads to inevitably, just on the internet especially, this idea that these are different tribes with their different sort of ideas of the world and their different truths, and they just fight with each other, and there's no sort of reconciliation or potential of actual honest communication and reckoning with the actual real complexities and nuances within all those different groups, within those different definitions and understandings of the world. And I think that's what's important in actually coming to an empathetic understanding that we actually are all
Can Kick be
very
embedded in
ignorant of all of
DGG?
this,
I don't know.
I think.
Probably.
And we're also all pretty terrible at relationships with each other and with personal relationships. And I think that that is my issue with sort of this rigid importance of distinction and definitions, which doesn't actually help at all. It just establishes that
there's no value?
this is the case. But in terms of actually getting to the value that is wanted by all of us, which is relationships, meaningful connections, to actually be with somebody who desires us, who sees us, it only gets us so far.
So to jump off of, because I feel like I'm understanding where Wick is coming from. I feel like to jump off of this, I feel like the distinction is important because the path to understanding whether or not you made it are going to be different between men and women. So for men, because we draw this distinction about sex, if you're a guy who's consistently getting sex, you are probably going to be a guy who is going to be able to consistently get in relationships. So now comes the next step. How do you establish your,
I would push back on that, because if you're a guy who is in the minority of men throughout history and now who gets a lot of sex, most of these guys aren't settling down. They're just getting a lot of sex with a lot of women.
Yeah, that's by
they're
choice,
living a particular kind of life. So
Yeah, but that's by choice, isn't it? You would agree it's by choice. These men are not
By
settling.
choice.
Yeah, these men are not settling down because they don't want to settle down. They just want to have casual sex and keep going.
yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't really I don't think we're talking about those men. What we're talking about is the vast majority of people who want a consistent relationship. And one of the ways that you can tell that you've made it to the point where in which you can consistently get relationships and
is
have
when you're a
options,
tier
is if
5
you can
sub.
semi-consistently be able to take a date and turn it into a sexual opportunity. That is going to be like the first step for a lot of guys. Is if you're capable of doing that, then you're trending in the right direction. So take somebody like me, who I've only ever had sex with one person. If I'm able to consistently get to the point of getting first date to sex, like very frequently, I probably put myself in a position where I'm trending in the right direction for that. That is not true for women, though. You agree with that, right? Like, if a woman is consistently able to open up her sexual options, that has no correlation with whether or not she's trending in the right direction for locking down a long-term partner. So I think the distinction is quite important between incels and femcels. Because of that, we have different paths or different signs that tell us along the path that we are going in the right direction. And it is important to kind of qualify those differences. And I think that's what's happening when incels are kind of upset when you're conflating male incels and female incels, is that there is, probably not, probably a bunch of incels think whatever because like women can get laid.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the majority of incels who have a problem with me saying that I'm involuntarily celibate, their problem is that I'm a woman and therefore it's not a reality women can't. And it's just this idea of our struggles are just comparing our struggles and perceiving one as more valid than the other and just reinforcing.
Wasn't there a really good book written about that called My Struggle or something?
Doesn't lead to any understanding. Where, as my saying that I am involuntarily celibate and explaining the nuances and particularities of my situation are more so there in order to
Mr. Redacted Logs Razonia about Big Tech versus what he said to Lav. Looks like Big Tech has not set his sights on me. Pedophile defenders get what they deserve as a Big Tech total friend of mine. He's insane. You should not mention him or engage with him in any way. Yeah, that's my thinking. Good. They are a cult. My friend got banned from his community tonight. I'm sure anyone... that's good. I think you should honestly just not talk about him with anyone for any reason, basically. Interesting. But he doesn't mind if Lav is close friends with him. Huh.
A commonality, a ground or a place of commonality in that we ultimately both, all of us, have issues, say, with forming relationships with our own personal stuntedness, and that we can find understanding on that ground, because I think that's the important thing. We're so obsessed with these little differences that we have, or maybe not little differences, but relative to our commonalities. We're so fixated on this group of differences that we have that we don't actually look at what we can really find together, which I think is what you basically need for human interactions and the success of those human interactions.
I just want to drill down on the idea that these distinctions, and get your opinion, these distinctions are important to be able to understand if you're on the right path to be able to form those relationships, right? The path is different for men and women, Do you believe that distinction is therefore worth merit because of the different path that men and women have to take? So I might look at sexual consistency as a landmark for me trending in the right direction of being able to get reliable relationships, whereas a woman might not. And so therefore, we should probably have different distinctions.
Again, like I said, I think they're important, but to an extent. I think they are, for instance, I went out with a guy.
The answer here is that like being in a good relationship as a woman means like demonstrate something, because finding a good man and getting a good relationship is difficult. Getting lots of sex for a man is difficult because like there's barriers to jump to have a lot of sex with men. This is very simple. There's not like a debate here, right? If you're a guy that fucks a lot of women, you probably have status in a lot of different ways. If you're a woman that's in a relationship with a really valuable man, you probably also pass hurdles. This is like non-controversial. It's not even worth debating.
For like a long time we went out, but we didn't have sex. And I would have had sex with him, but he didn't initiate it, and I didn't initiate it, and it was stunted. And then a year later, we came together and we spoke about it, and it turned out we both liked each other, and everything. So, I think that for me, it's tricky because I just think that this is really just about a lack of men and women in their personal interactions actually talking honestly, openly, and vulnerably about the different positions and perspectives that they're coming from, and instead relying on these generalizations that us streamers and people online and grifters online speak about in order to try and understand the other, rather than just talking to an individual woman who you are going out with about these very honestly.
But that's the thing. They can't, like the women they go out with, the women that will talk to them, there are no women who will talk to them or go out with them. The only access that they have is to the streamers and to people speaking generally. If they could have an honest conversation with individuals, I'm sure many of them would, right? But that's the problem. They are unable to get to that point. And I think this is where we're having this constant barrier.
No, I don't think it's that they're unable. I think with everyone, this isn't just an incel thing. I think it's just with all of us.
No.
We're in a culture, in modern Western societies particularly, when ease is the desired the desired route for things. It's a lot easier to sit
Convenience,
in your room and watch pornography and get off than to actually go out and look for sex. It's a lot easier to just sit and watch a streamer reinforcing your worldview and your perspective of being the perpetual victim of your sex or of your situation than it is to actually confront those issues. Go to, I don't know, counseling, go to like a group therapy, go and volunteer, go and find means to interact with women and face up to your fears and your problems. And I think this is the issue, that there's a lot of, with not just incels, but with everyone, for all different issues, whether it be, I don't know, your politics or your political tribe, your affiliation to whatever group or whatever positivity movement or what have you. There's a lot of pussyfooting, I think, around some of the real honest conversations we need to have with each other, especially in our personal relationships with people. And I think not just with incels, I'm also interact with. And I think that's what we need to be talking about more so, as well as these distinctions between us and our problems, or what have you.
Okay, so just real quick, and I'll let you go, Ahrelevant. I know I just got to really push back on this a little bit, because like going to therapy, going to group therapy, whether it be individual counseling, this is something I learned from Not So Erudite. That isn't working for incels, right? Incels are, for the most part, going to therapy. Like they just
No,
are.
I know that. Yeah, I do realize that.
Okay,
therapy
I didn't know that.
especially because, well, firstly, the majority of therapists are women, and incels, their perspective of a woman is pretty, they're not going to speak to a woman about their problems. And also it's very expensive. And in terms of therapists and therapy, which is quite progressive, and ironically, progressives are not very understanding or empathetic of incels. I don't think many therapists want to talk to an incel. It's very unlikely. So yes, again, I think this isn't just an incel problem. If anything, I think this is more a societal problem than anything else. But we need to talk about it very honestly in order to actually do something.
Go ahead, Ahrelevant.
Okay, so it seems like we got to the point where you agree that it's important, but not as big of a deal as many people are making it out to be. So we agree that there is an important distinction between incels and femcels, or male incels and female incels. While it's not...
Yeah, to an extent.
Okay, to an extent, but it is an important distinction.
It's a distinction to an extent.
Okay. I feel like that's...
I don't know.
I
think I pick up what you're putting in Ahrelevant, and she's like...
Okay, so
Anyway,
let me try this.
I don't perceive it as being as important. I think that this idea of it being
Well, of
important
course you don't, because
other things,
Can I
mainly things that we have in common.
Kidology, can you understand why some of us are frustrated, right? So my viewers, like, I'm frustrated. I think Ahrelevant's a little frustrated. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we seem like frustrated. Do you understand why that we're getting a little frustrated here?
male aggression. Say it. Because you're aggro fucking men. Yes.
I think the frustration is mainly that I'm not falling into your definitions of things.
Ooh.
Which is the point. Yeah.
I want to try a different question. Do you think, so you consider yourself a femcel, right? Yeah, a female incel. Involuntarily celibate.
Yes. Not in sort of the femcel that you see online who like hate men.
Yeah.
No, not like that. Or not this sort of idea that I can't get sex because there's no high value or good value men around. Yeah, no, not in that sense. But in terms of involuntary, and in terms of it being a me thing, I'd say 99% of it.
Well, it's always a me thing, right?
Do you think you would have an easier time finding a date, or do you think I would? If you wanted to meet up with a guy on a date, how quickly do you think you would be able to do it faster than I would be able to meet up with a woman?
Okay, I'm going to say yes for me. It would be easier for me, but I don't see how this is relevant because based on how the fact that I would not, like most women, I wouldn't just go out on dates. What would that serve me in terms of my objectives?
I'm saying maybe don't answer yes so quickly next time. Really put me out there again. So
well, you asked the question.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Savage.
No.
Fucking roasted.
And I'm not even saying that that's a better result, that you can get dates more quickly. What I'm saying is that that's just a different experience. Again, I'm not trying. Yeah, and that difference of experience, I think, makes it important. What you're saying is there isn't an important distinction between two people's ability to find love, but one group is capable to quickly and consistently get dates, albeit probably not with great people, but quickly and consistently get dates, while the other is not. Something that also I'm going to put out there that is kind of a virtue of us incel men, we don't talk about this enough, is the kind of opposite effect that a lot of incel men get, which is, I have maybe 20 matches on Tinder in 3 weeks, right? Which is fucking incredibly high, by the way. But like,
Milker. What's up?
What is melon? What's up?
Are you streaming?
Yep.
How's it going?
Pretty mel. I'm hungry.
What are you eating?
I don't know.
Did you gym yet today?
A little bit, but I don't want to do first.
A little bit. Okay. Maybe.
A lot for that, but of those 20 matches, probably 80 or 90% of those are going to be genuine attempts to get to know me, which is good. It feels bad that, like, out of the 500 women I swiped right on, 20 of them considered me desirable, right? But at the end of the day, there is a silver lining, which is I'm not going to have to spend much labor figuring out who wants to take me seriously or not. I can find that out in a matter of like 60 seconds or so. This is my king. It's just a little bit of time back and forth on the text if they ghost me or whatever. And then
what else takes 60 seconds?
No, yeah, that's kind of That's kind of how it is. I think that is a virtue that men have, kind of a silver lining that we have as when it comes to dating apps. But that again is a difference of experience that I think then makes it important. Because if I view, I know you've seen this a lot, where incels think women's matches are genuine attempts at relationships. That is a completely different lived experience between men and women, right? Because for the vast majority of the time, it is for men. For men, it's a majority of the time for me going to be a good attempt at trying to get to know me, maybe give me a shot, my foot in the door. But for women, it's not. And so again, it's just, there's so many different ways that I think it's really important to distinct the group of people that are social outcasts known as male incels and the social outcasts known as female incels. Because we have pretty radically different problems with pretty radically different solutions.
Yes, definitely. I think that, yes, I agree with you on that, most definitely. But I think what I'm saying is that I agree with you on all of that. But I think the problem with a lot of this identifying of distinctions is that it becomes a matter of whose distinction is more important and whose deserves more reckoning, more sympathy than the other, and just perpetuates a divide rather than trying to find a means of reconciliation, which is, I believe, the objective. And I think that's the issue in getting around it, especially when it comes to, say, streamers and commentary about this, when it is more so about, I think, just fueling the fire in terms of the looking for the problems beyond oneself, as opposed to actually reckoning with the complexity.
This is it, Kidology. This is why I'm frustrated, because it, like, I agree with you, right? I agree with you saying that, like, it becomes the oppression Olympics to a certain extent sometimes, but it also feels at the same time as if you were using that truth to kind of obfuscate and saying we shouldn't talk about the issues.
Yeah.
Oh no,
we shouldn't talk about it. That's how it feels. That's how it's coming across.
No, I think we should. No. For instance, when Alex was saying about do I think that X issue is
relevant?
Sorry.
No, he was confused because
I was confused too.
I'm sorry. My apologies. Yes, for instance, when Alex was saying that, do I agree that it is the important distinction? I said I agree that it's a distinction, but in terms of
a distinction that we should discuss because we need to discuss.
Of course,
right?
Yes, I don't deny that at all. But I think we need to discuss it in far more with far more nuance and tact than we have been. Not in this discussion, but just generically.
Sure. So
because generically, it ends up being a matter of just a war.
Okay, so then if you agree that in this discussion we have materialized the distinctions that are important, then I want to ask then, in your conversation with Destiny, where was it not? Because you made a follow-up video talking about how, off of that video,
defend me.
It's clear to you that I believe at one point you said the male perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, the male perspective kind of, or some of these content creators are blind to the female perspective of how they live their life with involuntary celibacy.
Don't shit
What
talk
was
me.
missing in your, because when you were talking with Destiny, I felt like he was making fine arguments. So what was missing there that is captured here?
I think in that discussion, sorry.
Yeah, that's a good little white blood
Me as a
cell.
moderator?
Yes, I think when that discussion we're talking about whether men are substituting pornography for sex, and we disagreed on that.
Maybe I only saw a little bit of it inside one of the clips. It was about 17 or so minutes long. To my knowledge, you guys talked about a broader range of topics, but one of them was about your specific case of involuntary celibacy. I believe at one point he asked you what percent of men walking down the street would, that conversation.
Oh, yes. I mean, I was thinking, well, for instance, I think in that discussion he was saying if I walk down the streets, how many men would, or something. And I think that, again, was a situation where nuance was completely lacking in terms of the nuance of everybody's situation.
Destiny, how many Muslims does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, it depends on whether the light bulb is 9 years old or not.
It's not even that wasn't a good joke.
Where men and women do not talk to each other and social interactions, everybody's busy, etc. Just all these different aspects and dynamics, which are very particular to people's situations. So we disagreed on that, and I think that sort of reckoning with the nuance was lacking. Maybe just because we didn't actually have any set thing to talk about, because it was very casual and relaxed. So yes, I think that was lacking there.
Okay, yeah, I'm just asking because I felt like a lot of people, I think you even referenced Destiny's Reddit inside of, or at least Reddit in general, inside of the follow-up video you had about it. I felt like there was a lot of people that really understood where he was coming from when you were talking about involuntary celibacy, because involuntary celibacy is a very specific thing. And I think that to bring back to your previous point about like people drawing the distinction and it not being all that important as much as people are making it out to be, I think that it is quite important because it leaves, I think that is how you be empathetic to honestly both men and women. Because like we brought up previously with the Tinder example, it is unempathetic to women for me to assume that Tinder works in the same way for me as it does women. That when you get hundreds of matches on Tinder or whatever, that it is in the same way of me getting hundreds of matches. These are night and day difference. If a guy gets hundreds of matches on Tinder, I don't even know how the fuck that happens. But like if you get hundreds of matches on Tinder,
try being a tier 5 sub.
Game. So And I feel like that's
yes, and I agree with you on that. But I think that, for instance, when incels made a dating profile of me, there wasn't that appreciation. There wasn't that appreciation that those differences are not the same.
Correct.
There was this idea that, oh, because she got matched out in like an hour, obviously life is easy for her, and fuck her.
Do you think you're?
But that, there wasn't that empathy, and that's the issue that I have with a lot of this rhetoric. Not in this conversation, because this conversation was really sort of the exception to what I typically see online, in which making known and sort of giving sort of a paramount place to these distinctions leads to just warfare and this idea that my struggle is more important than your struggle.
Yeah, but do you think
There's
you're
that word
perpetuating
again.
that same system by kind of conflating
My
those
struggle.
Because the solution, I think, to that, those incels doing the Bumble profile and then getting a bunch of matches and saying, therefore, you're not an incel. I think that the solution to that isn't saying we're similar. I think the solution is saying what I've been saying, which is we're different. Those Bumble matches are completely different for men than it is women. I think that's the solution, is to say that that's just not the same. Men are reading that as if it's a man's profile with tons of matches and not a woman's profile with tons of matches.
Yes, and I'm not saying that they are the same, but I'm saying insofar as we both have we have issues. Yes, they may be different, but in terms of the same kind of fear, vulnerability, fear of rejection or judgment, I think that there's a lot of common feeling, a lot of common psychological discomfort that we can actually talk about in order to get to some kind of actual communication. I think that what you're saying is good, but I think that the problem is that society, and I would say just modern society in general, not sort of incels or incel forums, is not in a place to give that kind of nuance. And so
What's up with this nuance shipping? You said a pretty obvious concession.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah, I feel like I don't like the it's nuanced. I enjoy its nuance, but then like I want to talk about the nuance. I feel like people use it's nuanced as a way. This is why I try really hard. Why I've said to like follow everything up with examples. I do this on almost everything I talk about now. If I ever give like, oh well, it's really complicated. It could be this or this. I try to say like, for example, this or that, or this or that, or it could be this. I think that you need to I think that examples are really good when having these conversations, because otherwise it just turns into like, oh, it's nuanced. And nuanced becomes like a thought terminator, where it's like, well, because I said it's nuanced, we can no longer talk about this subject. It's done. I said it's nuanced, and now the conversation's over. And it's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think that this is the most realistic and best alternative in terms of actually, I think especially for, I would say, my audience, who the majority are not incels. And I think based on the responses that I've gotten to some of my videos, especially mine saying that incels aren't racist, most of them see incels as sort of pariahs, terrible, horrible people, as being white, privileged men who are just sulking about a changing world, which just is not the case at all. I think that is sort of an inroad to seeing that, these are actually people with problems that you can relate to, insofar as not having the same experiences that lead to those same feelings, but that you have the same feelings about your particular issues that you have.
I agree with you 100%. I think that we, especially on the left, tend to demonize this group of people that we wouldn't do in any other sort. We have, for whatever reason, decided that it's okay to hate incels, and it's okay to be hateful towards incels, and it's odd to me, but that is just the case. I think.
Well, I mean, it's because a lot of incels literally fucking hate women, right? Like, I mean, like, not to say we should hate anyway, but like, I mean, that is definitely part of the rhetoric.
Is that an accurate portrayal of what you're trying to say here, just so we're clear?
I think I'm just trying to say that men and women, the sexes, there are differences, but in terms of what's the same about us, it far outweighs our differences.
Okay.
Yes.
So if that's the case, do you think that the solutions for men and women who are incel versus femcel, do you think they have the same solutions to fix their problems, or do you think that there are distinct solutions to fix, quote unquote, to fix a femcel versus to fix an incel?
Yeah, I do agree with Alex that there's no one size fits all for femcels and incels, but I also don't think that even within that the solution for incels is going to be the solution for all incels at all. I think that these are very particular things, and I think that the solutions are mainly found in sort of the interactions that individuals.
Don't a lot of black people just fucking hate white people? No, I don't think that's true.
So much
unless you're Scott Adams, I guess.
Our, especially social media, ironically, our greater connectedness on social media, that we're not having those intimate conversations and interactions with people in real life, in social situations where we really don't have the security or the sense of security of a screen.
Plain nose, trans, female, and lesbian. I'm no swimming in pussy. Pepe wins huge.
Selves vulnerable and just flesh and blood. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's just hard because I'm trying to figure out, like, substantive solutions. And I understand that you're saying it has to be on an individual level, but I don't. If that's the solution, I don't think there is a solution.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
Individually and say, oh, we work with you. Relevant.
I mean,
each person for themselves.
I mean, I genuinely believe like 90% of incels are there because of the same reason I am, because they lack social intelligence. I think that's the vast majority of incels. I think that the amount of
obligatory anti-FD super chat
looks is very little for most, unless you're like disfigured or something, which the vast majority of people are not. You're going to be able to, with a slight bit of improvements, be able to do all right and do fine looks-wise. The big issue is overcoming social anxiety, building social skills, doing things like that, maybe finding hobbies that get you around women so you can naturally and organically interact with them. I think that's going to be the solution for the vast majority of incels. That is a blanket solution I would give. It's not going to work exactly for everyone because, again, maybe you're disfigured or something like that, but like for the most part, it'll work for you.
Yes, and those social skills are going to be different as well. I think for each person, like it's what does that even mean? Like for some people, it's going to be actually developing on their sense of humor. For some people, it's going to be literally just talking to another human being. So I think it's tricky.
I don't know. I still disagree that, like, I think there are generalities that we can prescribe, right? Like when working on sense of humor, for example, that's going to work on more than just an individual level. Like that's going to, to be more funny is going to improve everyone's odds, even just minusculely. Like that's just going to be a general statement we can make in general ways we can do. And I think that we're looking at this individually in a way that's like obfuscating some of the actual solutions. You made a statement. I think both of you made this statement earlier on that this is just the way it is. This is just the world we live in. What can you do, right? And I fundamentally disagree with that kind of philosophy. I think that while we do have to deal with reality how it is, I think that we can make changes in our both individual levels and at a societal level that would make it different. We are kind of winding down on my end, and we're winding down on all this tech issues. But I wanted to just kind of get some kind of closing final things from both of you if we can, because I don't know if we're ever going to get past this impasse here. We've been banging our heads on it for like 2 hours now.
I mean, I feel like I got to a point where I wanted it to be. Like, it seems
where I won. That's what he wanted to say. I feel like I got to a point where I fucking crushed it.
Female incels and how we live our lives. I think we both agree that the way that most people use the distinction is not good. It's the distinction.
Destiny, the amount of everyday Muslims coming out of the woodworks with their handy age of consent. Infographic posters to defend Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old has got me fully black-pilled. Based Young Don tried to warn us about the cult of pedos.
Listen, just online people are weird, okay?
I want to get closing thoughts from you, but I just got to make another room for that. So give me one moment, please.
Okay.
And I'll send you that link.
Okay, thank you.
Jesus, what the hell?
Pepe wins.
Well, thank you for this.
Super chats. Soy! Soy!
What the fuck did he just say?
Yeah, let's never use this again.
I agree. So never do this.
While we're waiting for her to get the link, yeah, I think this has been. I think it was a frustrating but an interesting conversation. I still am overall frustrated. I think I don't know.
I'm kind of chilling. I figured there was going to be a little bit of friction or whatever. I think it's fine where it landed. I think we got off what we needed to get off, and we're having a good time.
We are having a good time. So yes, Kidology. So I guess since we are winding down and since we were kind of like at the end here, how do you think the conversation went? Do you have any closing thoughts? You mentioned that this is not typical. Why do you think it like, do you think that if you were going to have these conversations in the future, how would you structure them? How would you want us to talk about these things rather than how we go ahead?
Don't just say it's nuanced.
Well, actually, I found this a very, probably I would say the most meaningful discussion that I've had about this, because it really, for me at least, it was challenging for me. It also challenged a lot of what I came in believing, especially with regards to the distinction. I think that I have definitely given a lot more leeway to Alex's position on this as a result of this discussion, which I think is the most important thing for us to actually understand the perspective of the other. And so I think this was very productive for me personally in terms of understanding the perspective of somebody who's very engaged and very responsive and committed and dedicated to actually understanding inceldom and understanding these communities and these individuals. And so for me, it was very beneficial insofar as just educational for me. I think going forward, that is the most important thing, I think, especially for people who are not who don't feel or experience the world in the way that a lot of incels do, which is an experience that is incredibly invisible and incredibly isolated and very unforgiving, I think, especially for the I guess the small percentage of men who are incels who are not going to sort of transcend that at some point, which I think in this day and age is they are increasingly.
Destiny,
more men,
you say it's just the online Muslim
position,
community, but that doesn't really help when considering the real life Muslim community is like 100 times worse now.
This is an answer I already just gave. If we thought that like the majority of Muslims were like crazy deranged people, there's over 2 billion of them on the planet. Like the shit would be unlivable. Like our realities would be fucking destroyed. The reality is that like because there are so many of them, it only takes a small percentage to feel like everything is completely and totally fucked. But like if a large percentage of Muslims were crazy and violent, like shit would be fucked all over the planet, like hardcore fucked.
They are going to be stuck in this sort of perpetual condition. So I think this is very important to just see that we can have a conversation about this, and that this can be a conversation that is, I think, humanizing. It was definitely humanizing for me and my perspective, but I think more importantly, I would say for these incels, it's very important to humanize their feelings and their perspectives, and it definitely.
There are equally as many Christians. Are there? How many Christians on the planet? Oh, that is true. But I wouldn't say the overwhelming amount of Christians are violent either. You can find some really bad Christians in like Africa and shit though, right? I think it's in is Sudan the one where it's like 40% Christians, or am I thinking of Chad? LRA? The guy that did that, isn't the guy that did that Norwegian terror attack, like the guy that like set off a bomb somewhere and then went and like killed a bunch of kids on an island? Wasn't he like a Christian or Catholic extremist or something? I don't remember.
Got through to me through Alex, so I thank you for that.
The incel ambassador. How do you feel about that title, Ahrelevant?
That's all right by me, even though like, I think my incel days are behind me, but it's I like the title anyway.
You think so? Okay.
Wait, what is that supposed to mean? Goddamn, bro. No, that was very nice. I'm embarrassed that I don't have as nice things to say.
Who joined?
Like, I feel like I have to follow up.
I'm a woman. Doesn't everybody think nice things about?
Hello?
Can I be in here? Yeah.
Oh. Fuck, I hadn't even finished yet. I was still going through it. What's up?
I wanted to know, do you want to ask me any questions where you are right now, or are you still watching it?
I think it said you guys were winding down. What do you, I'm curious what you think an incel is. I feel like I have like a radically different opinion on everybody. I don't know if everybody else is off or some people are off or what's going on. What do you think an incel is?
Somebody that takes significant amounts of labor in order to be able to have sex.
Okay. Tell me if I'm crazy here. I feel like being an incel has almost nothing to do with the having sex part. I feel like being an incel has to do with like finding emotional closeness and intimacy with a woman part. So like, for instance, I think you guys had this thing earlier where you mentioned like if it was a year to have sex, right? If you could take like an average incel and say, listen, I'm gonna give you like a cuddly, loving, romantically inclined girlfriend, and she's gonna date you and love it for 1 year, you're not gonna be able to have sex with her. Would you take that or leave it? I feel like most incels wouldn't even think for a second. They'd be like, yeah, I take that 100%. And it would be like, yeah.
I would agree.
Okay.
But that's not really how I think the world works. What I was referring to is that usually we use sex as a signifier for what you exactly described.
Yeah, it could be. I wanted to make that clear because some people will say things like, I don't know if I'd heard Kidology say this or somebody else, but I'd heard the thing where it's like, incels are just Volcels because if they really wanted to, they could just pay like a prostitute for sex. And it's like, well, an incel doesn't just want sex. They want somebody that would be willing to give them sex. And paying for it kind of defeats the whole purpose of that. That was a part of it. Another thing too is, men and women, you kind of fought for this and then kind of backed up and kind of fought for this. If a man is having a lot of sex, he's probably a really successful man because there's big gateways between men having lots of sex, right? Or barriers, I should say, not gateways, right?
Yep.
For a woman, her marker for success is usually like, nailing or getting down, bolting down like a really successful man, right? Yep. Getting in locking down. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Okay. I think you believe that, but then that kind of got danced around a little bit.
I think you haven't gotten to the point, but I think later I don't think we address women's success stuff, but that it's just different for men and women.
Yeah, I think we got through that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of, was there anything else, guys?
So did you get to the part where I try and talk about where Because did you see Kidology's video responding to the conversation you had with her?
I think I did. Yeah, I just got triggered and I turned it off. I probably should have watched the whole thing.
Yeah. So I tried to address the difference because she seemed to be of the opinion that the conversation that we just had was more productive. And so I tried to address the difference between the conversation we just had and the conversation that you had. Yeah, we talk about that. I don't remember exactly what she said.
I just got to the one where she said that she felt like this conversation was really productive, but I don't know if you guys got into the why, but... Ahrelevant is super quiet. Yeah, that's because these fucking retards fuck with their volume. Hold on. I'm setting you to 100, and then it's up to you to figure your mic out. You are at 100. Right. You need to boost your microphone by like 5 times, okay?
Okay. Let me try something. I actually don't think I can.
Oh, there you go. Are you close to it now, or? Whatever you did, it's good now. Good job.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that for the most part, because my takeaway when you guys had the conversation was that you were talking very specifically about the involuntary bit, right? So would you agree that if a woman has significant trauma that prevents her from being able to have sex for, let's say, 6 months, let's be a bit radical, and she finds it very difficult to be able to find a relationship with a person who will wait 6 months to have sex with her, would she be an incel in your book? Why not?
So when I think of inceldom to me refers to a very specific phenomenon of men that didn't socialize well with women in grade school and high school, and then men that graduated out of places where women would be present, and now they're basically stuck in a world to where foreseeably they will never talk to or experience closeness with a woman ever again. They didn't get the social skills in school. Now they're working predominantly male-driven jobs, and they're like aged out of basically socializing with women. Having trauma or something different or whatever, and saying, well, like they might even be technically involuntarily celibate, maybe, but it just describes a totally different phenomenon, I think.
I agree. It does describe a totally different phenomenon. There's usually the term used is mental cell for like.
Okay, a lot of cells out here.
Yes, indeed. Is usually for incels that are blocked because of some kind of mental disability, neurodivergency, or something else. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's. So basically what you're just saying is you want to reserve the term incel for a very specific lived experience.
Yeah, because I think it describes something specifically. We start branching out incel to mean like, I'm the type of person who, like, the only way I get off is with 8-inch dicks. 8-inch anal dicks. So if I can't find a guy that's into anal and, you know, wants to have and it has an 8-inch dick, like, I basically can't fuck anybody. Like, is that person an incel? Like, I guess, technically, but like, I mean, like, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about like generally a group of men that lack the social skills to talk to women, and then they like have aged out of areas where women are, and now they're like in a weird world where they might never talk to one again. You guys had a thing that came up earlier in your conversation that I would have pushed back on, where Kidology is like, incels always present this as like, they're running out of time and they have to have sex right now. There's a very big time pressure on sex. I don't believe that there is a time pressure on sex for incels. I think rather what the worry is that they've missed the opportunity, so it's never going to happen. Like if you were to tell an incel, listen, here's a set of steps that you can take and you're guaranteed to be able to fuck a girl in 1 year, they'd be like, oh, okay, I'm totally fine. And I think it would actually alleviate like 99% of the stress. I think that for an incel, the worry isn't that like, oh my God, it might be 2 years before I can fuck somebody. It's more like, oh God, I didn't fuck somebody 2 years ago, so it's never going to happen. I think that's where the stress comes from.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the context for the time situation.
The context was Kidology was just bringing up that like incels seem to have a big time pressure, that they want to have sex right now instead of being patient with a woman. It was close to the beginning of the convo. I wrote it down in my notes.
I guess, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid and I don't remember it. I mean, I agree with the examples that you're given, but I think that it's typically not how the world works, in that somebody is not going to be able to walk up to you and tell you this is how it's going to work in a year, because I think anybody reasonable would probably agree with you that that is how it works. But the reason why there might be a perceived time crunch is because nobody can walk up to you and tell you that you are guaranteed to have this in a year.
Yeah,
And
but
so
I mean,
they-
like, there's
they-
markers in your life that make it seem like I was saying before, you could probably do like an actuary table or an amortization table or a depreciation table on like likelihood of having sex if you're a virgin by some age, right? Like the higher the
sure.
age you
Yeah,
get to
100%.
as a virgin, the less likely you are of ever having sex, right? So that's probably where that time crunch comes from, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean, that's-
necessarily. I just the way that Kidology presented it. She almost presented it as like they're like trying to pressure women into sex really quickly. But I don't think that's at least for incels. I don't think that's the case. It's not that they're trying to pressure someone into sex really quickly. They just feel like if they don't get it over with soon, that it's just going to be out of their reach forever, basically.
Well, yeah. I don't know. It depends on the context too, because I've interacted with and seen a lot of content from incels who say things like, you know, or even just like my normie friends will talk about how women lose interest if you don't make moves like in the relationship, and so they're worried about being on a time crunch inside of an interpersonal relationship.
Yeah,
or
that's
something like that.
That has to do more specifically though with like getting friend zoned. Is you don't want to be in an area where you feel like you're building romantically towards something with a woman, and then you find out later that that wasn't the case, that she just saw you as a friend. And again, I think all of this plays into like a lack of development of social skills. Like if I'm talking to a woman, I know very quickly like if we're ever gonna fuck or not. She knows because I know that she knows very quickly if we're ever gonna fuck or not. But that's because I have like a lot of social experience with women. But there's a lot of incels who genuinely can't tell, who I'll read like conversation logs and shit, and he'll be like, "Do you think I'm close here? Like, do you think this is gonna happen soon?" And I'm like, "Bro, she has no sexual interest in you whatsoever. Like, what are you talking about?" Yeah, so like there is like a quote unquote time crunch, but I think that's more specific to like a fear of getting friend zoned or not realizing when a woman doesn't have romantic interest in you, basically.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of, yeah, you're putting yourself on a time crunch because you don't have, to reference what you were talking about, the 1 year plan that written down on paper. You don't have the knowledge or to be able to know, okay, I'm probably going to get this at some point, so you think, I got to get this done with, I got to get this over with quick. Yeah. I'm actually curious about your lived experience, because you talk about how you have a bunch of experience with women. Have you always had a bunch of experience? Have you always been doing pretty all right with women? Or I'm
just super lucky. My mom moved away when I was like, I think 14, 15, and then my dad moved away when I was 15, 16. But even when he lived with us, he worked a ton. I think when I was 16, I was either late sophomore or early junior. I didn't have any way to get to school. So it was either my grandma's friend would drive me sometimes, and then eventually through a friend, I met a girl who lived in a similar area than me, and she was like, "Oh, if you want, like, I can give you rides to school because you're fun to chat with." And I was like, "Cool." So she gave me rides to school, but because I was always tied to her, I couldn't go anywhere without her. And I went to Creighton Prep, which is an all-boys school in Omaha. She went to Marion, which is an all-girls school. I basically ended up hanging out with all of her friends all the time because I was always stuck with her because she had the car.
Nice.
So yeah, so I dated like 3 out of 5 members in that group. I would make out with her like every day after school because if you hang out with a girl long enough, you're gonna start doing shit like that. We'd do that. But I was just at a very early age, I just had like a ton of socialization with women, like constantly. But I just lucked into that carpool situation. And if I didn't get that situation, I might actually be like a fucking incel because I went to an all boys high school. I don't know where would I found girls otherwise, you know. But yeah, so I just got really lucky there, basically.
Advanced slurs.
Hold up, did you? You don't have to answer this, but I thought you've already stated this before. Does Nathan not go to an all boys school?
No, my all boys school started in high school, not in grade school. Nathan is 11, not high school yet.
Oh, okay. I thought because I thought you were.
I'm debating sending him there, but I don't know yet.
Where that might have made you an incel to be at an all boys school.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of incels that go to co-ed schools too, but it's just the education of my.
Looking at one.
True, yeah. The education at my high school was really, 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 really good. And if I can't find that in a public school for him, I'll probably just send him to that high school again. But I don't know yet. I haven't made a decision on it yet.
You ready for him to blame you if he becomes an incel? You're gonna be the ultimate.
Yeah, probably. Especially because we're like a split family. I'm sure he'll have his little edgy teen phase. But yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. All right. All right. That's I guess all I wanted to say. Oh, funny stuff. You talking to Aiden, by the way. That was
oh, Jesus Christ.
That was funny stuff, brother. Keep it up.
Thanks, bud. I try my best.
All right, much love. See you later.
Yeah, have fun. Be careful.
Not me.
True, yeah.
To your list.
Yeah. Wait, one more thing.
Yeah,
I forgot. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm always here, bud. What's up?
Fantastic. Last spell. You played that game. You liked that game, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think it releases like tomorrow, the 1.0. Or
Yes,
something.
exactly. Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to say is just keep you in mind. Listen, man, I'm the video game guy. Okay, I love that shit so much. I keep eyes on that shit.
Okay.
Do you keep eyes on? How do you know it's coming out tomorrow?
Because people in my chat fucking spam everything all the
Hey,
fucking
let's
time.
go, DGG, the real winners. All right. Much love. See you later, buddy. Bye.
Have fun. Bye.
Yeah. I think one thing that kind of was glossed over because me and you agreed quite heavily about it, but I actually think is very important and a distinction that I even saw was missing. And a lot of the conversation was about what you were talking about beyond physical labor, psychological and emotional labor that needs to be done, that should be kind of calculated when we're talking about involuntary celibacy or somewhere close to that, right? Which is that there's going to be, like, while it might be true that you can physically have sex whenever you want, like, to even be able to do that and not have a severely negative experience is, might not be realistic. And so I think that is something that really needs to be discussed when talking about men and women, because I think that women are typically more often in positions where in which they're going to fit that criteria of, hey, I don't really want to have sex on like the first date or something like that because it might be dangerous, might be, X, Y, and Z, maybe past situations going on or something like that. And yeah, I feel like that is overlooked even by people who share very similar opinions to me, is that, and I would still count, again, somebody with like trauma who is not able to have sex very quickly at all. If that resulted in them not being able to get sex, I would count them as involuntarily celibate. I don't think many people would, and I would fight that.
Yeah. And I do just want to add a little something just in line with sort of being more empathetic to your position as well. I think with this as well, I think there's also a lot of pressure on men, especially in terms of their performance sexually. And I think also I've had men in my comments saying that they haven't had sex because they had an experience where a woman insulted them or said something to them, or things just didn't work out. And I think that's also something that there's a lot of taboo around, especially because of this idea that men are just, sexual, and that it's very easy for them to just, with everything. So yeah, I think there is a lot more room for conversation about this as well, with an understanding of also men and their trauma with regards to sex and sexuality.
It's okay to insult men in ways it's not okay to insult women. Like,
yes,
you can make fun of men's physical characteristics in a way you just can't with women, at least socially, and be socially accepted on that, and outside of very niche spaces. Thank you both for being here. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you so much for moderating.
Thanks for reaching out to me, Ahrelevant. Ahrelevant's the one who wanted to set this up, so he reached out to me, and I do appreciate that. It's very great. I hope you don't regret your choice.
I do not.
Can we just reach out to you to moderate?
Yes. If you want, if you have someone and you want to talk to them, okay, but you don't feel it's going to be productive if it's just you two kind of hatching it out. I'm decent at driving conversation, so please reach out.
Brilliant.
Absolutely try
to
Wick is actually doing a decent job at all this shit.
What are my many talents, man? What do I got coming up?
That was a little cringe.
First of all, if you like the stream, as scuffed as this was with and Kidology, I'm going to send you someone to help you with your tech. I'm going to that is my gift to frankly everyone who's going to interact with you.
Thank you.
Get that done. The rest of the week I'm off. No stream tomorrow, no stream Friday. I'm touching grass, gang. I'm doing things, okay? Next week, however, we're going to have some banger content. Monday, Katie versus Flosny on gender roles and things like that. Tuesday's call-in shows with Double Shine. Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the valorization of vice. The idea that it's okay to mock, shame, ridicule when bad things happen to bad people. Recently with Andrew Tate's situation coming out, and him may have cancer, may not. There's been a lot of people who are like, good, I hope he dies in pain screaming of cancer, right? And that, I think, is disgusting, and we're going to talk about it. Thursday, Ahrelevant's going to make another appearance. We've got Pixie, Kelly Jean, Ahrelevant, Mind Waves, Erudite, and we're going to be talking about women saying no. Women setting boundaries. What should that look like? Should women have that responsibility to be setting the boundaries? Is it reasonable to fear saying no to a man? We're going to discuss it. And so that's what we got coming up. Where can we find you, Ahrelevant, if people want to find you?
Twitch.tv/Ahrelevant, YouTube.com/Ahrelevant, I think is how that works. I don't know if I have that.
Yes, I've put it in my description box as well for people to subscribe.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure,
and kick.com/Ahrelevant. Start streaming on Kick. Yeah.
Supporting gambling and
Listen, you can't beat them. Join.
No, that revenue split is tempting.
Yeah, the revenue split. It's pretty good.
Check him out, gang. He's great. His content's pretty fun, and he is the Incel ambassador, so check him out.
But just hold on, can I add just one more? I do not gamble on stream. Just to make that clear, I do not gamble. Okay? But I am on a site that is unfortunately hosted by gamblers, but I am not. I do not gamble on stream.
Okay. Why?
Hey, you've got to pay your rent somehow.
Yeah, I gotta make the bucks.
Gambling's not the way to do it.
Wow.
Kidology, where can people find you in case they don't know who you are? I don't know. But.
Oh yes, well, you can find me on YouTube. That's my domain. I am trying to be a bit more active on Twitter, trying to get a bit more raw. But yes, primarily on YouTube, just under @Kidology is where I'm at. So